When civilians need help, they call the police. When the police need help, they call the Emergency Service Unit.
Police emergency service workers are being credited with saving a woman's life.
New York cops in full combat regalia.
CNN, there are reports of an explosion possibly.
It's a goosebump-inducing introduction. As I've said before, it's always played whenever we have bosses from the emergency service unit, past bosses from the emergency service unit on the program. And tonight we have a sergeant who will introduce momentarily. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 313 of the Mike to New Haven podcast. If you haven't checked out the previous episode, it was a very fun one. The last couple of shows were really fun to do overall. We had the good fortune of being able to chat with Detective Billy Neese from the Bomb Squad as Tales from the Boom Room made its return. Of course, Tales from the Boom Room profiles the NYPD's arson, explosion, and bomb squad. Billy did the last 10 years of his career from 2004 until 2014 when he retired. And maybe tonight's guest ran into him on a bomb job or two back in the day. Prior to that, Rich Rotans, FDNY captain for the best, the bravest interviews with the FDNY's elite, former OEM guy too in New York City. And happy anniversary to OEM, which recently turned 28 years old. A groundbreaking invention that was back in the mid-90s for emergency management in the world's largest and greatest city. And just a quick hello to everybody tuning in tonight via YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitter, and a special thanks to John Latanzio for helping me get in touch with this guest. And I'm not going to go into the whole spiel, but if you know me, you know these last 24 to 48 hours have been rather unique, to say the least. So for those of you who've reached out with messages of kindness and support, thank you very much. If you know, you know, but we won't dive into too deep into the weeds on that one. But in the meantime, let's go through a couple of sponsors. And if you're looking for a consultant, especially when it comes to media stuff, podcast stuff, I know just the guy for you, and that guy is me. Need advice on how to start your podcast? Frustrated with the editing process? Can't find a voiceover guy? Hi, I'm Mike Colón, and I'm here to help. I'm the owner and founder of MC Media Editing Services, your premier consulting company for all things media, where I can offer you consulting advice on how to get started, and once you get started, editing, as well as voiceover work, all for a very reasonable price. If you want to reach me, you can contact me at 917-781-6189 or the email that you see listed here. I'm always available, and I'm always willing to help. Again, 917-781-6189. Why go to some giant consulting firm that's going to charge you an arm and a leg when you can just come to me? If you want to be stress-free, the way to go is to call MC. MC Media Editing Services, your premier consulting company. And I'll be riding with this next ad for quite a bit. And of course, as I've said before, if you need a PI for whatever the case may be, you don't want to look any further than my man, Billy Ryan. The Mike to New Haven podcast is proudly sponsored and supported by the Ryan Investigative Group. If you need an elite PI, look no further than the elite Ryan Investigative Group, which is run by retired NYPD detective Bill Ryan, a 20-year veteran of the department who served the majority of his career in the Detective Bureau, most notably in the Arson and Explosion Squad. So if you need a PI to handle anything from fraud, legal services, and anything else that you might require, contact Bill at 347-417-1610. Again, 347-417-1610. Reach him at his website or the email that you see here. Again, if you need a PI, look no further than Bill Ryan and the Ryan Investigative Group, a proud supporter and sponsor of the Mike to New Haven podcast. Proud supporter and sponsor he is indeed. And of course, a shout out as always to Bill. He's been a big help and a good friend over the years. Chris Ebden, who tonight's guest remembers from trainings back in the day in the early stages of the New York City Housing Police's emergency rescue units, tuning in tonight. And Chris, I'm waiting for you to come on the show too, Parker. But it's good to see you in the chat. All right, my next guest is an alumni of both the New York City Housing Police and New York City Police Department. And what's more is he got the opportunity to work in the rescue squads of both police departments as a member of Housing's Emergency Rescue Unit, which was short-lived, but nevertheless an interesting component in New York City's emergency response history, and certainly for the Housing Police. If you notice, if you're watching tonight via YouTube, LinkedIn, or Twitter, you notice that the background image is a Housing Police Emergency Rescue REP. Now, they were merged or later absorbed for a time, and the Housing Police fully was merged in 1995 with the NYPD. And so those who were in the Emergency Rescue Unit, who'd been working on loan to the NYPD Emergency Service Unit for a while, were fully absorbed, I should say, including tonight's guest, who worked stands for a stint in Brooklyn's Truck 8, which was very brief, primarily in Staten Island's Truck 5, where he was a police officer in the unit, later on a sergeant too. And that for this volume 44 of the Ebon inside the NYPD's emergency service unit, a man I saw in an episode of Cops, retired NYPD ESU Sergeant Scott Zink. Sarge, welcome. How are you?
Good. Yourself?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Like I said, it's funny because I told you this story. I'll tell it to the audience before we get into everything. There's an episode of Cops on YouTube, and they have 3 of the 5 that were filmed in New York City. The other 2 haven't been uploaded yet. 2 of them with the NYPD, 1 with the old New York City Transit Police. And there's a scene where the Emergency Medical Rescue Unit, which was their ESU, is going to a man-under job, and Franco Baraducci, who's been on the show, is there. And Kenny Schnetzler, who's also been on the show, is in that episode. In the scene, Housing Police is also there, their emergency rescue unit, and a guy pops up right in the camera shot. He'd been working on the jacks to try to lift up the train. So I pause it, screenshot it. He's got Housing Police and the rescue logo. I message Latanzio, hey, do you know who this guy is? He says, Scott Zink. And thus the hunt was on to get you, and I found you. So, shout out to John, and shout out to that old episode of Cops. Indeed, indeed. So, really, before it all started for you, I'll ask you, where did you grow up?
Well, I was born in Brooklyn in Flatlands, Flatbush actually at first. Bounced around here and there. Wound up before we moved. It was halfway. I was in sophomore in high school in Flatlands. My family moved to Staten Island. Finished the year up there and moved to Staten Island, and I was there until through when I came onto the police department, through retirement. Post-retirement, I moved. We're in Utah now, Park City, Utah. But no, I was a Brooklyn guy.
Were you a first-generation cop, or did you have family on the job?
No, I am the first generation. Yeah, no, they have no idea where I came from.
So it's usually one of those things where sometimes it's your parents telling you, and I hear this story both from FD and PD guests that come on the show, which is my dad or my mom or both said to me, listen, take the city test because it's good. It's a good pension. You get benefits, all that jazz, or even could be a relative, a friend, anybody. What was it that attracted you to the idea of law enforcement, if not necessarily law enforcement, then at the very minimum, civil service?
I was bouncing around. I was originally going to college for like an aeronautical engineering degree, things. I bounced around, didn't work away. I wound up working on Wall Street, but the backside of it, and I'm not an office guy. I can't stand sitting behind a desk. And literally one of my closest friends for my whole life, Tony Trocchio, he joined the NYPD, got into the highway, and the kid, he loved it. And he was constantly yipping in my ear, you got to come, you got to come, you got to come. This is the greatest thing in the world. And yeah, that turned my eye towards it, and I took the test and I got on and, I wound up on housing, which was an interesting thing because I didn't know there were 3 departments at the time, even though I lived in New York. But it turned out to be, for me at that point. But that's what got me in. It was a friend of mine that was in the department and just said, this is the greatest thing. And he knew how I felt where I was. I mean, I enjoyed what I did, but I wasn't a sit behind a desk kind of guy.
Right.
And he says, well, this is your own boss. You get out, you do your own thing. You're free most of the time, come join. And I did. And that was the greatest advice I ever got then. It got me where I am now.
Of course. And that in your office essentially is the most unique office a guy can have, or a gal for that matter, too. It's a sector car, and you're constantly moving. You're in and you're out. And for a young person or anybody that likes being active, that's the job to have. Just before we continue, a couple notes to the audience. As always, the super chat's there. If you want to fire a question away to Sergeant Zink, I should say, put it in the super chat and I will highlight it. And also for those of you that may hear it, it's heavy rain here in Connecticut today, so I apologize if that comes out with the background noise. We're having quite the storm out there. So coming on, because I remember Scotty Wagner telling me this, and you work with him in housing, great guy, very good friend of mine. He's been on the show too, is that they had their own academy for a while. And the last academy was when Scotty came on in 81. After that, everybody was under one academy, and they would essentially run you through the academy, and you would find out close to the end where you were going to go. So you didn't, or just about maybe the middle. When did you find out you were going?
I knew right away.
They told you right away? Okay.
Yeah, when I went in, you go through, the investigation. Well, actually, no, it was before the investigation bit too. They call you in, you took the test. They break you into bands. According my list number was 91. Not because I was a genius. It's just they, between 90 and 105, they just randomized the numbers. But no long and short, I go in one day for something. I'm in, in the recruit processing area, and they go, okay, everybody with list number from 1 to 200, come follow me. I'm like, okay, what's going on here? And they come in, congratulations, you've been selected for housing. And I'm like, housing? What? And I'm like thinking, I'm like, well, okay, well, this is what I wanted to do, so that's what I did. But no, I knew going into the police academy that I was going to be housing. Went through the academy. We were all grouped together and came out. And there was no separate. It was funny, too. It was lucky. My investigator actually happened to be a housing guy. So he took a lot of my anxiety away and let me know how things were going to work and what's going on. And, how it may not be NYPD with its, all its glory, but we had advantages also.
Yeah.
So, I was pretty stoked coming out.
Yeah, I would imagine. And that's the beauty of it. You're still working in New York City. And a lot of people that come from housing or transit that have been on this show have told me, listen, was it cool merging after a while? Did we get used to it? Did it open up a lot of opportunities for us in our career to merge with the NYPD in 95? Sure. But, we were the best kept secret in New York City is the common thing that I get. And yeah, when you look at the beat that the housing cops had, the community advantages, especially as things continue to evolve and more faith and more resources were given to the department, I can see why. Small department, more camaraderie, less bureaucracy, a really good beat. You get to know everybody, the good players and the not so good players. I can see why you guys enjoyed it.
No, it was, you said it was a small department, and your reputation, good or bad, got around very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
You got known well. And small, quick thing, real quick. And just, one of the things you'll never get in the NYPD, this happened to me once. My original partner got into a really bad off-duty accident, and, we were trying to make it a line of duty. He stopped in an accident on a highway and got clipped by a hit-and-run driver. Really got bad. And I'm like, my original CO at the time wound up being the chief of patrol for housing.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wasn't thinking. I was kind of like, in a panic mode. But either way, I was just like, I picked up the phone to headquarters. Listen, I wanted to talk to the chief patrol, the guy I knew. And I said, hey, I need to talk to the chief. We have, officer this that got hurt. And the chief of department picks up. I'm like, Chief Henry. And I'm like, hi, chief. That wasn't who I expected. Could you see me as a PO in the NYPD calling up headquarters, say I want to talk to the chief of department, and he's the first person that picks up?
No, wouldn't happen.
It wouldn't happen. In a small department, it would,
maybe,
and it did. And we took care of ourselves, and that was what the difference was. It was a small department, so yeah, you kept things in house. Where NYPD liked airing things.
Yeah, and that's I think that's a good comp, and it was the same way in transit to a large degree. In that at least you get to know who's leading you. You had Chief Henry, you had DeForest Taylor. So you get to build that relationship and that rapport with them to where, listen, even if you're working in other boroughs, guys, as you said, to your point, guys know, okay, this guy's cut out for the job. He's good police. He's a real police, or man, this guy, I don't know how the heck he got on. So either way, you wanted to make sure, or not either way, you wanted to make sure that you had a good rep when you came on. That way you can make a positive impact. And things were changing in the 80s for housing. Like I said, more resources were being given. It was quickly, kind of shedding that reputation, if you will, as little brother or the bastard police of New York City, which I always, when I look back at the history of the three departments in New York City, it's a shame it was that way. But the idea of housing, hiding, and being unavailable, I look back at that generation of 80s and 90s cops like yourself in the department, and I say, you know what, bull, because you guys were out there getting it done. So tell me, PSA 1A was a mixture of Coney Island and Staten Island. You're talking about Brooklyn, Staten Island, pretty interesting place to work, two boroughs bordering each other. What did you learn early on about that particular beat that shaped you as a cop? And tell me about some of the more unique experiences, good and maybe not so good, that you had early on that shaped your career as well.
I got lucky. And again, I guess we talked before, I worked out, I started out in PSA 1. My commute was a mile from my house, which is, most people that get to do that, it's amazing. Was it the busiest place? It was that. Boroughs, it's not. We also worked Coney Island, so again, it was a notch up. One of the best things I got out of that, I got lucky. There was a federal program that they were paying for a 24-hour-a-day foot post at the Stapleton housing projects. So the boss said, you want to stay in Staten Island, you need to volunteer for this. I'm like, okay, you got it. So I walked the footpost. I think the program was still running for about a year and a half after I got out of field training. So I, by myself on the day tours, by myself on a late tour. I had a partner on the 4 to 12, but that's where I worked, steady there. So that was good. The one thing I think the best thing, and this, again, sheer luck, I think this was the best thing that ever happened to me in the entire job. The squad I came into, the junior guy had 20 years. The boss had over 20 years. What I found out after is he squawked. He did not want me in that squad. He said he had a bunch of senior guys. They weren't go-getters. He was looking to finish his career and get out. But he had this young whippersnapper come in, guys that had time on the job. I always said they're not teaching me how to be a cop. It's those 5-year, the 5-year and up guys, the 5 to 10 years, still got the, you got the go-get-em attitude. The job worked for me. How not to get in trouble, how to handle jobs without causing more grief for yourself. What they would do is they go on jobs with me and they sit behind me and they'd let me handle the job. Get a little bit of trouble, but if there was a point where I was about to step on myself, they would like, oh, step off, time out, let's help you. And they would teach you. And I tell you, that was the best lessons I ever learned in my career. It was a great place to work. Staten Island had its own unique situation because you're working in a lower crime area. So you have different areas to do. Could be boring at times, but it had its moments and it had its places. Working in Coney Island, because we wound up doing that a lot. Me and my partner flew to Coney Island every night. I worked midnights after that program ended, and I pretty much worked midnights almost my entire career in the police department. And so pretty much we were the junior guys, and so they're like, oh, we need people to go to Coney Island. I'm like, okay, we just went. So it upped the pace a little bit. Things were busier. And you learn. I liked it. It was a good time in my life.
I would say, and that's a good thing. I'm glad you mentioned that, because sometimes, listen, there are certain senior guys at the end, and I'm not knocking them. I understand they put their time in and paid their dues, but you could tell they're just there for the paycheck. They don't quite want to leave yet, but they pretty much retired without actually officially retiring yet. I think that's a lot of jobs. But if you get a guy like that, listen, they've been there, they have the experience, they know what works at a job, they know what doesn't work. And, I highlighted this when Jack Cambria and I spoke a little while ago, in which, as he said, I'm paraphrasing him, it's not so much what you say sometimes at a job, it's what you don't say or what you don't do that can make all the difference in terms of how that job is going to go. Because if you can come in on a 1 and keep it at a 1 and prevent it from getting to a 2, a 5, a 10, that goes a long way. Especially because, and again, working in the housing police, you're going to probably see those people again. NYPD, you move around a lot. You may see somebody once, may never see them again. You might move commands. You might get transferred to a different unit. Housing police, not so much. You saw these people, even if it was for good stuff, and you didn't have any problems with them all the time.
Oh no, that's again shaped the way I, my police career, my, the way I work. When you're talking about that, see people all the time. Yeah, you got to know the people. You were the original community police, because I work where you live. And you had to shape that. And I can't tell you how many times I got help and I got saved by local, people, not because they stepped in, but because they picked up the phone when I didn't have a chance. Still remember a time, it was just a simple fight, and I happened to be walking by and I go to break it up. And the next thing I know, I start hearing sirens all over the place. So I'm turning around like, what's going on? There's nothing. I wasn't really listening to the radio. I look up and I'm surrounded by about 300 people, and then the next thing I know, well, somebody saw that and called the 1013, and people came in, and it was like, okay, you just treat the community, you treat the people right, you get treated, the same. The other thing you learn in the housing, which is when you say housing not available, we're a small department. We had obviously less resources. One of the first lessons I learned, I was working a midnight in Stapleton, and I'm just bored. So I'm up there checking the roofs and out there walking around, and this very senior sergeant comes in to sign my book, and he goes, and I don't know if you remember, in the housing, they had the police record rooms. So that's
I
where
heard
you
about
went
those.
in, you had a bathroom, you had a desk, you bring minor collars in there, and then you can, downtime. But, so I'm out patrolling. And he's at the record room. He gets me on the radio, like, where are you? I'm like, I'm on the roof of this building. He goes, get your butt down here now. I get down here, he goes, do you realize that between you and the precinct you're at, you're the only one awake right now? He says, if you get in trouble and you call for help, you're on your own. Don't leave this office until there's a job. Like there was that. And then, the other stuff you learn, you learn what you say and what you don't say and what you do. We got a job in a building in the Cary Gardens in Coney Island, and it was a shots fired job. Cary Gardens for Coney Island was one of the worst projects we had. There was a lot of violence there. We get up there, and just the way the building is situated, there's a central, and there's 3 different hallways that go off in a different direction. Go down the hallway all the way in there. There's 3 shots in this guy's door. He says, yeah, there's a party on the other end. They got to the elevator, and all of a sudden they just pegged rounds into us. I'm like, okay, we're about 12th floor. We're up right now on a 30-story building. Go around to the corner. There was 4 of us. Knock on the door. There's this massive party going on. Probably about 60, 70 people in this apartment. And they start getting lippy. And we start, okay, party's over. You're out. Start pulling people out, searching everybody on the way out, looking for a gun. We start getting through. All of a sudden, this crowd starts getting hostile. We realize that this crowd of people, some people have guns, are between us and the only way out of this building. And it's that point you got to realize, it's not I'm a cop, you got to listen to me. It's let's slow down, keep everybody calm till the rest of the troops come. We called in 85, eventually got there, but in between then and there, you realize and you learn that sometimes you need to eat crow, or how to handle a situation. You learn how to manipulate people better. I see it's more like city now, and it's a very small department, and your help might be an hour away. You learn how to handle people and maneuver things to do what you want to do without, it's not like you can pick up a phone and get, 30 people in 10 minutes.
Right. Or sometimes
it's a
even
different kind of policing, but it helped you. It helped me in the emergency service side. You learn how to move people to do what, always getting physical about it. It was a good way to learn and good way to, lesson to teach other kids.
Talking with Scott Zink here on the Mike to New Haven podcast, episode 313, volume 44, the E-Men inside the NYPD's emergency service unit. And it's a good point because, I think it's not just New York City, Scott. I think it's any big city, LA, Chicago, Boston, Dallas, Houston, any big city that you can think of where there's a different confidence and different air in how you deal with people. And I don't think it's arrogance. I wouldn't go as far as to say it's arrogance, but there's that confidence in knowing, hey, listen, I could talk to this guy. Not that they're going to do this, but I can handle this a bit differently because I know if it hits the fan, all I got to do sometimes is not even say anything. I just can hit a button on my radio. Sometimes That's all it is these days. Hit a button on my radio, and I got at least 5 squad cars that'll be here, before I can even finish my sentence, as soon as I snap my fingers. But even then, just because you have the resources doesn't necessarily mean you want to use them. And as you highlighted, that would be beneficial not only in patrol, but same thing in emergency service. If there's a better way to handle a job without exhausting all options, and that's a good way to go. Now, you mentioned housing, inventing community policing, which they did. I mean, they had no choice. I'm not knocking it. That's a fact. Given the beat they had, they had to. They also invented the verticals. And any cop that, whether you have gotten on after the merger, before the merger, and you worked in a housing development, you know what that means. And you're going up in these staircases sometimes. You don't know what's waiting for you around the corner. We saw that in 1988 when Tony McClain got killed, for example. Yep. He's looking for a missing girl. He gets off the elevator. Turns out it's a drug deal in progress, and the shootout ensues, and he gets killed. But those patrols were critical because you could catch drug deals going down. You can catch illicit behavior going down. You can catch a junkie shooting up, or just people that, shouldn't be there. Maybe they're casing out an apartment looking to do a robbery. And that was a significant part of the reason why crime went down in housing projects throughout the 5 boroughs into the early 90s, right up until you guys merged. So doing those verticals, tell me about your first one, if you can recall it. And if there's any collar or any interaction from that time that sticks out that you found in a vertical, feel free to tell us.
Yeah. Verticals were definitely a mainstay. We were definitely told, you're working a foot pros, you need to be walking up and down. Overall, I got to say over 50% of my callers that weren't, 9/11 related, where they, called me for a job and they went to it. These were pickup callers, were picked up on verticals, people that were on the rooftops that weren't there, people in the building that weren't there, or there was a robbery or an assault going on in a stairwell or a hall well. That's where you pick that stuff up. They use the rooftops as shooting ranges. They use the rooftops, to shoot up their drugs, to deal their drugs. There was a lot of crime. They would drag people up there for robberies, and there were a lot of rapes. One of the things, you were taught different ways. There were ways. There were some people that taught you make yourself be known. On the way up, when you're walking up and down the stairs, make noise so they know you're coming. The other hand, there were people saying, well, if they know you're coming, you turn the corner and you're looking into a gun. Because these have happened. Not to me, these have happened. There are other people say that be sneaky when you go up so you can catch them what you're doing. What I got is you learned when to do which one. When was it better to do one versus the other? When you talk about a funny one, we were doing a vertical on a building, and there were two sets of stairways. So there were two landings on the rooftop. And we came up one, and we're crossing around the other, and we're walking around, and we're opening the door. And when you do these in these places, you usually have your gun out at the time because you never know what you can open up the door and see. And they open the door, and there's these two people standing there, and the guy that held the door kind of like panicking, like, oh, shit, boom. And he's like, I'm like, okay, now what are we going to do? Because now they know we're here. And luckily, we scared them as bad as they scared us. They opened the door. They just happened to be two kids, talking, just wanted to be somewhere. They weren't doing anything nefarious, but it was still funny. We just were laughing our butts off saying, okay, we scared you, you scared us. Don't be on the roof anymore. Rooftop stuff. We had a guy, one of the guys, we went up on a shooting, the guy was on the roof. As I'm walking up the roof, there's like a river of blood coming down the thing. He was shot in the thigh and he ruptured his elbow, thing. But we've had shootings. Most of my drug collars were on the roofs. It was almost easy. I go up there, I grab you, you trust me. If you don't live in the building, even if you are, you're not allowed up there. You search it, you get a drug collar. It's not that hard. So yeah, it was our mainstay. We let our presence be known. We were here. You learned how to maneuver in a building without getting yourself hurt.
Yeah, that's important. And I think even sometimes when you're rolling up and let's say you get a burglary call, burglary in progress, what's the thing? Turn off your sirens. When you're far away from the call and you're trying to get there, have those sirens going. But as you get closer, turn off the sirens. Or even when you're coming in, if it's possible, turn off your radio or lower the volume on your radio. That way, you have that element of surprise. Because like I said, not even with the Tony McClain scenario, just in general, it's happened where sometimes it takes a second. If you get the jump on them before they get the jump on you, that could be the difference between a good collar and a line of duty death funeral.
Oh, yeah. And then I was just thinking, there were at least two other cases I know. One relatively recently where there were officers doing a vertical, and they got surprised by somebody and accidentally pulled the trigger and killed the person. And they became high-profile crimes. The first one that I know of actually was the impetus when they removed the single action on the handguns. They went to the double action only because there was a housing cop that had the gun cocked, and he was going up on a roof, and the kid jumped out on him, and he just kind of got startled, let a round hit the wall, ricocheted up the wall, hit him in the head. So that kind of got them to take those away. And then the recent one, there was another one very recently, a young kid that was doing a vertical, and he got same thing. And so, yeah, you kind of learn. Again, do you want to let them know you're coming because people got hurt? Do you want to let them not know? And you have to pick and choose what works best for you.
Right. I think that's a matter of discretion. It depends on the job. And, I'm not talking more about senior guys. Senior guys, obviously, for the most part, they know what to do in those situations. But I think there are certain instances where after a while on the job, and tell me if I'm wrong, you get a gut feel for the situation and I want to make my presence felt right away, or all right, let me use the element of surprise. It really depends on the job. And I'll give you a minor example, again, going back to cops. When Pat Murphy got called to that rat in the apartment, granted, that was a funny job. It wasn't serious. But when he got called there with Paul Toschi and Eddie Reyes, the first thing he goes and says when he enters the apartment building is police. And it's a minor detail, but sometimes even something as simple as just saying it right when you arrive there, police.
Yeah.
He's going into what he thinks is an animal condition job, and it is. But what if he walks in and there's something nefarious going down? By announcing his presence, that could have been a difference. So I like that you brought up that point because it really, and you don't see that a lot nowadays. It's unfortunate. The discretion that an officer has been so narrowed down that it's hard for them to come up with those decisions because they're thinking more patrol guide. What does the patrol guide, which is important, but sometimes that goes out the window. Sometimes you got to go with gut feel and discretion.
Yeah, no, I liked us. I mean, like in line of that, a lot of times again, it depends what you're looking to do. It depends who you're working with. If I'm looking for somebody that's not looking to make collars, well, then you made your presence known when you went in the building. So the word gets around quick. Finish whatever you're doing, get out of the way, and we'll be fine. Or if you're looking to get a collar, then you sneak around a bit more. One of the things which was unique about at least the way I covered it is, I'm policing your house.
Essentially,
it's a housing problem, right?
True.
So one of my big things, at least the way it was known when I worked, and a lot of guys would know that like drinking in public is illegal, right? You're supposed to get it. My thing was, listen, show me respect, I'll show you respect. It'd be like me sitting on the porch of my house and having a beer, and a cop driving up saying, you can't drink on the porch of your house. It'd be like them sitting on the benches on the front. Show me the respect, cover it, put it back in the bag, put it aside. I'm not going to break your chops. It's your house. You know what I mean? And you got a lot of respect out of that. It went both ways. I treated you with respect, you treat me with respect. And it helped my job. If you're looking for somebody, he's over here, or, if some guy was getting lippy, they'll be like, listen, don't mess with him because he won't mess with us. Zink ain't a bad guy. Let's just chill out and let's make more out of this than it is. But it's a different situation because you're basically policing inside their house.
Yeah.
And it made it very unique.
Mm-hmm. And that's where, when talking with housing guys, especially like Jeff Oberdy or Jimmy Shanahan, when I had him a little while ago, it's the same thing, which is you've got to, for lack of a better way to word it, humble yourself because, and this goes for any cop in any environment. You're coming into their neighborhood. Now, there's the exceptions to every rule. You could be the guy or the gal that grew up there. So it's kind of already your territory as it is because you know those streets, you grew up there. Not the case for most cops. You're coming into their territory. You need all the friends that you can, that you can get because think about that 1013 that happened earlier. You were just going to break up a fight, but because you did right by that person and you treated them with respect, they had enough love for you to call in that 1013. Maybe you needed it, maybe you didn't, but you're glad that you at least had that respect factor with them and that rapport with them. They felt that much about you to call that in. So a very important thing, and I'm glad I asked about the verticals because it allowed us to go down a little bit of different avenues. And you touched on teamwork as well in that, which is one of the things I wanted to ask you about. So I'll accelerate a bit to 1993 in that housing. I don't want to say they were late to the game because I understood why they waited so long. ESU's coming into their jobs anyway in the projects, and there have been a lot of them. But they decided, and I remember Latanzio telling the story when he was on, okay, Transit's got a rescue unit. NYPD's obviously at ESU for that, at that point, over 60 years. We might as well form a rescue unit of our own. And I think the concept was good. So a lot of training. Remember, as I've said before, for those of you that may be tuning in now for the first time, the New York City Transit Police and the New York City Housing Police were both federally accredited. So they had certain access to certain trainings that the NYPD did not. Now, granted, the NYPD has a big enough budget that they don't really need the federal accreditation.
Right.
But if you're a smaller department, it helps. You guys did a lot of training throughout 93. You guys graduated on October 31st of 93. Unit went into service New Year's Eve of 93.
Yep.
But tell me about the process you hear the units getting started. There's rumblings about it. And then you get the opportunity to be one of the originals in the unit.
Yeah. So, I mean, a piece of history, just not to backtrack with that, the way we got it, I know there were rumblings and people wanted to do it and people were putting in for paperwork, putting proposals in, especially Ralph and Charlie Rubin, who wound up being our CEOs. They were trying to push this. The impetus was this. There was a housing sergeant shot. There was a job where they had requested the issue. And the issue said, nah, call us when you get there. If it is what it is, then we'll come. And wound up happening is one of our guys got shot in the face. Mm-hmm. Said, nah, this ain't happening again. This is BS. Blaming anybody to say anything. You don't know what was going on the side. Looking in hindsight, whatever the jobs are going to power. But he said, I'm going to be able to if I need this. And that's what the final straw was, that they said, yep, we're creating an issue. It didn't help that the chief of the police of housing and Ray Kelly at the time, they both did not like each other. Because I remember Kelly told him, you can't do it. And our chief told him, you know what, we're a housing authority. We actually are a state agency. I don't report to you. I should have fired you when I had you, and I don't care. We're doing it anyhow. But that the training and the way it came up, the rumor came out that it was get done. On my end, it goes back to the original part. The chief of patrol was my original CO, and I got along with him pretty well. As a matter of fact, I did a short stint. I did a 3-week stint driving him. His regular chauffeur was on vacation, and I think it was an extended vacation. So we both lived in Staten. He lived in Staten Island. Going to drive him for 3 weeks. So I had my opportunity. So I'm like, okay, when I put it in, so I got accepted. And I thought that was what I really wanted to do. One of the biggest regrets of getting into housing versus NYPD is I really wanted to do an ESU thing. So I'm like, okay, here's my opportunity, and then all the names came around, and it was an amazing group of people. And they put down an amazing training for us. It came back kind of to the same thing in that we went to ESU when they heard we were making this. They actually came to us and said, okay, this is the equipment we use. Let's buy it together. We, economics of volume. This is what we train. This is what we plan to do. And Kelly said, nah, we're not doing it. You can't have the department. We're not going to train you. So that's how we wound up going to transit.
Yep.
And that's how they put up a training program. But it was transit. We went to Suffolk. We went to Westchester. Yonkers PD was a big training group for us. We had everybody. We had the FBI. My dad worked for the Navy at the time as a civilian, and he hooked us up with their weapons station. That was our bomb squad training, until we can get to the bomb squad. We had different people, knew people, and we just went everywhere. And we were like, if you want to train us, we'll take it. Until then the merge came, and then we went through the other way. But no, there was just training everywhere.
FD, you guys train with FD too, right?
I'm trying to think.
I remember hearing that. I think you guys did a little bit of training with the FD&Y.
We might have. I know there was a point where a bunch of us went to EMT school in a college.
Which is important.
And there was a bunch of us that were already EMTs already. So while we were in school, they might have hooked up with that. But you know what? Yeah, was it possible? Yeah, I'm sure we did. We were one of those, get along with everybody, don't be anybody's enemy. You're going to work with everybody. We don't want to be in that, position where, you have to. We want to get along with everybody. We want to work well with everybody. And that's what we were told we were going to do. And that's what we did.
And it worked out for the best. Even in a couple of notes, Ray Kelly and DeForest Taylor, yes, you're right. They did not like each other very much. And I think there was an incident where one night on the SOD channel, I think it might have been a sergeant or an officer calling in a 1013 or trying to call in a 1013. And Kelly came over the air and said, unauthorized transmission, basically get off the channel. And as someone, mind you, I like Ray Kelly. I was like, when I heard that story, I'm like, not a great look. Not a great look.
No, then there was that whole, there was a time when we first came on and we went active that we actually were told we can't use SOD.
Yeah, which complicates matters to say the least.
It did. Again, cooler heads prevailed and people were talked, and we worked out a protocol and we were allowed on SOD. And it worked out well. We never had issues with anybody. It wasn't an ESU thing. It wasn't that. It was higher ups. It was above our pay, way above our pay grade that was causing that. But we worked well with the ESU at the time. It was just in transit, hence how you found me, going on one of their jobs. One of their requirements was like, if we'll train you, we want to call you for backup. And that's how it happened, But that was above our pay grade thing. And that was bad. Yeah. I didn't like that.
No, that's not good at all. And Chris Ebden, who was in New York City EMS at the time and did a lot of training with you guys back in the day, he has the picture from the original class. And you can see a lot of familiar faces in here. I'm trying to, I don't know if you could see my arrow, but that's John.
That's John.
That's Richie Winwood.
Yep.
I see Steve in the back, Lanos, and that's Stefanakis. Yep. That's Vinny Dans, who got killed on 9/11. And I see Sergeant Coglan right here saying
in the back.
He got killed on 9/11. Where are you?
Yeah, that's me. All right, that should be, you're pointing right at me there.
Oh, okay. I got you right there.
Right next to Carl Smith and then Charlie Rubin above him.
Mm-hmm. Well, I forgot yet. Carl Smith, who I know on. Is that Vinny Martinez right here?
Yep, that's Vinny.
All right, Vinny Martinez, and then this
Richie
is the
Senecola's in the middle, right next to
huh?
Charles, and it's Martinez.
Okay. Yeah. A lot of familiar faces in this photo, and seeing
Oh yeah.
Stephanakis with hair is always
Well,
a particularly unique
me
sight.
also.
Yeah. Yeah, fair point. Fair point. And that was the original class that got it done for 8 months as an independent unit. And thanks to Chris Ebden for those photos. And there's a few more he has that I'll show a little bit later on if I can. So I'll ask you, even though it wasn't long as an independent unit, you're still running to jobs. Is there one? Chris Ebden put termite for Vinny Martinez. That was his nickname.
Yeah. Well, we had a lot of we had nicknames for all of us.
And that was his. Is there any job that sticks out from that standpoint? Could have been an MBA, an EDP job. What is it that sticks out that you were on for?
This is, to tell you the truth, this wound up being one of the bigger ones I've ever done. Period. This was a pretty big job, and I was looking through the thing and trying to figure it out. One day, it was just, and this was happenstance. We were out on regular patrol, and I'm trying to remember. For the life of me, I can't remember the newspaper, but they had, the higher ups had arranged for two of our REPs to drive with a representative. One had a reporter, and one had a photographer from a pretty big newspaper, and I just can't remember which one it was. So it was almost to the end of the tour, and we got an elevated job up in the Bronx, Morrisita Air Rights. Big 30-story building. We got a job. It was in the middle of the summer. It was hot as heck. It was like 98 degrees. Humidity was through the roof. The first guys got on the scene and found out what it was, and they called me right away. This was an overloaded elevator. There was about 40 to 50 people in this elevator. Don't ask me how they pushed it. Well, it wasn't that many. It was probably about 30 people in this elevator, but it was 110 in the building. It was the first 10 stories or 12 stories. It was two sets. So it was 1 through 12 and then 12 through 30. And it was stuck on the 8th floor on a blind shaft. And in the midst of all this, somebody broke up the fire hydrant on the roof. So the water was pouring down. They had elevator mechanics on the scene. They were about 30 years experience both. They couldn't get the elevator started, and we had major problems. So I get there. I had a chauffeur. I had two of the cars there, and right off the bat, we knew we are hauling up this equipment up this flooded stairway. We get up there, and we knew we had problems. It was getting medical issues. Well, it turns out there was a young kid in there that started having an asthma attack, and he's 3 stories below from the open elevator door I'm at. So the first thing I say, I repelled 2 people down to the bottom, brought oxygen, hauled the kid out, and now we got to figure out how to get these people out because the mechanic's telling them, listen, I don't know what's going on, but I can't get this elevator started. It is jammed. So normally what the first thing you do on an elevator is you can release the brakes and the elevator will move, right? And the elevator is supposed to move up. The counterweight is supposed to be heavier. This elevator started moving down. So it was overweighted so much. So my biggest problem I had in my head is I can't see. It's not like I have elevator doors I can move. I can move it slowly and get it down where I need to. I couldn't. It had to come up because that was 3 stories to the closest door. I'm 8 stories down to the next one. So when I release it, if I release it slow enough so it's safe, what's going to happen is it's going to equalize somewhere 3 stories above the ground. So instead of being 3 stories below me, it just wasn't working. So my plan came up was, we're going to leave the elevator where it is, above the elevator, and get the people. So at that point, we don't have that equipment. We didn't have jacking tools. We didn't have that stuff. ESU did. So I got on the radio and I put over SOD. I need, truck 3, truck 4, come in, bring up their electric jack. So they go there and U4 shows up. It was funny. He goes, "You want to do what?" I said, "Well, I already repelled the guy down, so I'm taking care of him medically." I pulled the kid out. I says, "I want to break through the wall." He goes, "You're going to do what?" I said, "Yeah, that's what I'm going to do." He goes, "You got this?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm all good." He goes, "See ya." He takes off, but the truck 4, the truck 3 guys came up. We broke this quick 5-foot drop, put an elevator in, and we pulled these people out. It was a long, tiring job, but it just put everything we trained into at the time. We worked as a team. We got everything done. EMS set up a mass casualty setup in the bottom, and it all worked out. And other than that one kid that had the asthma attack, who wound up being okay, everything worked out.
And even that worked out in the end because you wound up being okay. That's a great story.
No, it was a big job. It was something that I was like, wow, this is what I look for. This is what I wanted to do.
Yeah, I never heard that story before, so that's the first year on the Mike the New Haven podcast, and thanks for sharing that because the 8 months went by so quick that I always anybody that I get on this show who was in housing rescue, I always like to ask that question because I'm like, it's 8 months we shouldn't gloss over. We can't just jump straight to being on loan to ESU because something could happen in those 8 months, and maybe it might not be a job that lives on, like the '93 Trade Center bombing, for example. But
Right.
listen, a job like that, you helped out 30 people on a hot summer day in a burning elevator, in a burning, not a literally burning
Bernie,
building, but the
but
temperature's
yeah,
hot,
no,
So
no,
it's
we had other jobs. Different people do things. We got into a lot of stuff. We were in the projects. And
you're
projects at the
gonna,
time. They were. The whole city was hot, but the projects were jumping like
oh
crazy.
yeah,
You know,
early '90s, oh yeah,
yeah. So you had that. It was a lot of work. And you laugh. One of the things is one of the agreements we had to get us back on SOD was we had to give an ETA, and if over a certain amount of time, they would co-dispatch issue, to the job. That was, whatever it was. And then the other one was we weren't allowed to do tactical work on our own. Co-join it with the issue. And again, not an issue, not a problem. But we had a job. I think this was in Upper Manhattan, and I went there, and I forget it was a barricade or I forget which one it was. It wasn't a search warrant. And when I get there, the issue was there. And it was an issue not an issue, it was a housing captain there. And he says, well, you got enough people to do it? And I tell him, this is our protocol. This is what we're supposed to do. He goes, nah, go in. I'm ordering you to go in. So I'm like, well, I got a captain on my department ordering me. So we went in. I wasn't looking to do anything else. Well, the issue duty captain was not a happy human being. So he gets a hold of me and he starts ranting and raving. And I'm like, listen, boss, I got it. I told my boss, what am I supposed to do? And that's what he did, and he understood.
well, at least. And I think I may know the captain you're talking about, so we'll leave him nameless to protect the innocent and the guilty and the
Yep.
innocent, mostly the guilty. Talking with Scott Zink on the Mike the New Haven podcast, volume 44 of the Ebon inside the NYPD's emergency service unit. I feel like the housing police was really on the cusp of something big because, as I talked about with Shanahan, it was a department that was really ahead of its time. It was already in the 21st century before the 21st century even started. And then comes the summer of '94, where Giuliani had been fighting to get the merger for a while. And I think there's a New York Times article from September of '94 where guys were retiring from the housing police because they felt a merger was about to hit and they didn't want to go over.
Yep.
Part of that, an early casualty, if you will, the department itself would stay independent for a little while longer because the units were fighting it. There were injunctions and lawsuits in court. The rescue unit got absorbed. So here you guys are, still housing cops,
Yep.
still in the housing payroll. You can drive
Yep.
around in a housing sector car if you want to on overtime. Jerry Kozlowskis did that. But you're now on loan to the emergency service unit. And the date that that changed for you and your path into ESU began August 15th, 1994. So when you heard, hey, you're going to be operating on loan for an indefinite period of time to the emergency service unit, and you're not going to be an independent unit anymore, what were your feelings on that? Because that was a weird time.
You know what? I knew we kind of had an idea internally that the merge was happening. It was like a fighting a retreat. Fighting retreat. You knew it was going to happen no matter what. I thought it was good. My part of the decision was I wanted to stay in Staten Island, so I went to. I'm sure we'll get into that later. I went to Truck 5, which at that time was Hesse. But you know what? I didn't feel bad about it. I thought it was okay. I missed the guys. Working everybody. On my end of it, yeah, I missed a lot of them because we really didn't contact them as much, being in Hesse versus being in ESU. But I saw them once in a blue moon. But it worked out well for me. I liked it. When you say that, one of the we had one of the incidents being in housing and being in ESU, and working in a PD unit. We had different uniform standards. In that housing rescue, we were allowed in the wintertime, we were allowed to wear our uniform shirt with either a dickie or a turtleneck. And NYPD didn't allow that. So we actually happened to be on a job. This is my first experience with NYPD's version of bosses versus ours, big department, small department.
Right.
I forget what the job was. I was an EDP, probably. It was whatever. We handled it fine, and I got along. But there was a captain there, and he was, running the show, and I was working with him when we got the job done. And I go back to quarters, and I don't think anything about it because the man didn't say anything to me. But now I get a phone call from the borough, and they're like, listen, the captain wants to give you a rip. Huh? I'm like, oh, what happened? He didn't say anything to me. The job went well. There was nothing controversial about it. There was no arguments. I mean, he was the captain. He didn't like my uniform. So he wanted to give me a command because I wasn't in proper uniform. Well, and my answer is housing. The boss didn't like what you did. He told you what you were wrong. Hey, idiot, why aren't you dressed correctly? What's wrong with uniform? Well, he didn't ask me, well, why are you not in uniform? He went behind my back, was going to give me a rip. But the borough attorney told me, well, he's not NYPD, he's housing, and that's there. He didn't like that answer either, but that's his uniform, and that's what right. It's too bad. It turns out he was a nice guy. He wasn't a bad guy, but I'm like, you know what? If you have a problem with me, tell me. I don't go off and do things like that, but I guess he was one of the guys that didn't like the idea of the merger, so, but in whole, I loved it. I thought it was the greatest thing. Remember, I told you my original idea was I wanted to be an ESU, and not that housing rescue wasn't my ideal either. That was an amazing, opportunity. It was, but this is what I wanted, and here I am, I'm getting it.
Right. And you're getting it in full. And I'm laughing because the show. So Joe Maliga, who's in the chat a lot, the question, the running joke he has, where anytime I get an FD or PD or EMS person on this show, the question of, did you ever deliver a baby? And he had a rather interesting way of bringing it up when you talked about internal feeling. Did anyone ever say I'm having a baby? So, well, did you ever deliver a baby?
A bunch of them. Actually, it's funny. None of them in housing rescue, all as a foot post or patrol in Staten Island. Yeah, I did 2 or 3 of them. And it wasn't so much delivering; it was more like catching them on the way out. Because by the time you got there, they were there. Yeah, it was one. It was a cab in Coney Island. Me and my partner. One was on the way to. Thanks. One was on the way to the hospital in a cab, and the cab driver must have realized right away she's not making it. So we just happened to pull over and see that he was waving us down, and me and my partner delivered a baby right there. And then there was another one in Staten Island, same thing. We got there, like, oh, how many babies you had? Well, it was my 3rd one, and like literally 5 minutes later, we had a baby out. Yeah, that was an amazing. I mean, it's just that's one of the best things you can do as a police officer because it's always good.
Oh, it's uplifting. It's the most uplifting call you can go on. I mean, I can't think of much better than that. Joe's asking as well, is there any one of them you keep in touch with or not really?
No, not really. No, unfortunately not.
It's hard. You do the job and you kind of, for lack of a better way to word it, you kind of just move on. It's not that you don't care. It's a happy thing, but there's so much going on, especially in the unit like ESU or housing rescue. You don't really have time to keep up, so it's tough. And the same thing for the FD guys that have to do it. You're going to job to job to job. It isn't until all these years later when you're retired, it's like, oh crap, yeah, I did do that. I wish I would have followed up,
Also the other thing too, you don't realize, one of the things you don't want to do is sometimes, because it goes more on the bad side than the good side, you don't want to know what goes on. Sometimes you don't want that follow-up. You don't want to know because it's not going to be good. So you kind of, once the job is done, the job is done. You may talk about what went on the job and how the job went, but what was the job, you might leave that alone because you want to be mentally sane.
Yeah.
Because, what I always said, this is, some people, my children sometimes raise their eye, but a cliche. If I show up on your job, you're having the worst day of your life. I don't go on an ESU or an ES housing rescue. You never went on ordinary jobs. If I went there, you were pinned in your car. You were about to jump off a roof. You were trapped in your house.
There was a collapse of some sort.
Right. You were having a search warrant executed on your house. I wasn't showing up for good things. And if I showed up, you were having the worst day in your life. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, so there wasn't many positive parts of it. So you kind of realize in the back of your head you're doing good, and you leave it at that. So you generally sometimes didn't want to follow through.
Yeah, and I get that. I mean, listen, the job may end well, and as you say that, I'm thinking of 2 things. Danny, so I'm writing a book on the NYPD and FDNY interviews I've done over the years. One of the stories I got in the book is Danny Cohn, because if you remember, Danny Cohn, Joe Vidge, Pete Linarello from Six Truck, and Mike Curtin went on a building collapse job in Harlem in '99. Where they saved a guy's life. He was pinned in there pretty bad. He was a worker. They got him out. They saved the guy's life, saved his legs too in the process, which was equally miraculous. And there's a great photo of them afterwards, of them smiling, because the job is complete and it turned out well. You're not smiling on the way over to the job, though, because, hey, it's a collapse. And I'm sure the guy was relieved and he was certainly grateful. He went back to thank them. But in the moment, he suffered a life-altering injury. And again, Joe Viggiano, that documentary they shot with him in the spring of '01, shortly before the end. At one point, he says, and he was right then when he said it, and he's still right now, 23 years later, you're not calling a cop to have a cup of coffee with you. And the same is true for the fire department. You're not calling them because everything's okay. You're calling them because something's wrong. And sometimes,
Right.
as you know, in ESU, something's very wrong.
Right.
And I can understand not checking back in. Now, I want to move to Hesse because Hesse was such an interesting setup in that
It was.
it's the emergency squad. So technically, it is 5 truck. For those of you not familiar with New York City, Hesse stood for Highway Emergency Squad Staten Island. Because if you ever went down there, you had 5 truck, but you also had the highway unit, and both of them
Right.
are in special operations. So it's part of NYPD SOD. But for some reason, they merged them to where, I guess there was. Now they wouldn't help on jobs, but if I had this correct,
Well,
wouldn't a highway
okay.
guy drive the truck sometimes?
So here's the thing. I'm a big history guy.
Mhm.
So I like to know. So Hesse has a unique history. The NYPD, so you have the NYPD precincts, you have the borough commands, right? Borough
Mhm.
command is in charge of his borough, but you had the auxiliary units, detectives, narcotics, ESU. Think of all the auxiliary units. Well, they didn't report to the borough commanders. NYPD started an experiment, and I forget what year they started, where they took all those auxiliary units and they put them under the borough commander. So the borough command, I didn't report to SOD. I didn't report the detective bureau in Staten Island. Didn't report to the detective bureau. Those all auxiliary units reported to the borough commander, and they were trying to see if that worked better on, especially in the smaller borough, if that worked better for command structure, incident command, and such and such. So when I got in there, the older Hesse guys, so the bosses were Hesse, right? The bosses were Highway Emergency Service Staten Island. So I covered highway and I covered emergency service. The cops were separate. ESU cops, highway cops, highway cops. What I can say is probably about 10 years before I got there, the highway cops would go through SOD ESU school.
Really?
And yeah,
I didn't
they
know
would
that.
occasionally drive the trucks, but they were occasionally throwing heavy vests and helmets. Now, once I got there, I think all those old timers had passed through already. But being in the same building, being in the same locker room, we showed up on highway jobs. Highway showed up on our jobs, even if to watch the truck and do something. So we kind of worked together. But that, for me, that was a rewarding for me. I went through motorcycle school. I went through AI investigation school. I went through all that radar pursuit school. I drove a motorcycle. What I loved at night, in the middle of the night, because in the morning you weren't technically, unless you were in a detail, you couldn't ride a motorcycle on certain hours, right? So once 6 o'clock came on, I put on the highway uniform, dropped it. They paid me to ride a brand new Harley Davidson. I did it.
Hey, Les.
I'm out cruising out in the Harley, and 6 o'clock in the morning. It's not like it's in Manhattan where there's traffic. I'm on Staten Island, and then I did that. So I did highway details. I did a presidential detail as a motorcycle escort. The one time I was going to do New Year's Eve was funny when you talk about Pat Murphy. He was the senior guy, and we worked midnights together.
Good
So
man.
he's an amazing man. One night, the one time I was going to finally get to do the highway side before they split the units, I was going to do Times Square. He goes, Scott, I'm pulling rank. He goes, I've always wanted to do Times Square. He goes, I'll do Times Square. I wasn't complaining. I did the motorcycle, but I just learned, but I just heard it was just a brutal detail, but it's something he wanted to do. But
Right.
so I got to do both, and that was, I thought that was amazing. I loved that.
No, of course. Who wouldn't? Who wouldn't? I'm laughing here because Chris Ebden sent another picture of you. It's you in the fun house. You might remember this.
What did he say? Oh,
You-
yep.
You in the fun house. There you are, right back there.
Oh my God.
May
Like I
17th,
said, I wanted to go through it
1993.
last night. I didn't get a chance to. I have all these guys' pictures because I was the official guy taking pictures. Other than this, I thought that's funny though.
Yeah, pretty good. Pretty good.
Yeah.
No, it's a unique setup, and a lot of guys. I mean, I know for guys in other trucks, they said they didn't mind working in 5 truck. It was just difficult to get to because of the traffic if you're coming from other boroughs. But for the
Yep.
guys on Staten Island that got the chance to work there, I remember, I think Paulie Pericone's a Staten Island guy, so he lived. He was
Actually,
a
our
one
kids
truck.
were in the same school for a while.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. So even though he was a 1 truck guy, I'm sure he flew to 5 on occasion. That must have been great for him because I'm like, it's right there. Plus, it's a different environment. Do you still have crazy jobs? Yes. Do you still have wild moments? It's still New York City.
Yep.
But what other borough can you get a unique job where maybe turkeys are crowded up a roadway? You don't hear about
Yeah,
that.
well, deer jobs. I've had to sedate deers. We've had deer jobs. We've had turkey jobs. We ever, obviously everybody has raccoons, opossums. Yeah, we get
Rats.
stuff that you wouldn't get elsewhere. I had we won't get into that. I had a job where they called me, the fire department called us. They had a room full of rattlesnakes. you know,
Well,
you
there's
know,
that.
but I would say the Bronx and Bronx and maybe more of the Bronx, they'd have deer jobs too. It's unique. It was good. I could tell you in the beginning, especially when they finally and the ironic part is the actual order signing, taking even after the two units were separated. Highway 5 and Truck 5 were separated right before, but we were still under the borough. And then the order that took the ESU unit and highway unit away from the borough, put them with the respective main commands, was actually signed the night before 9/11.
Really?
Yes. So, but once
Wow.
they separated, we interacted more, but we were the last ones they called, kind of thing. And there was occasionally, I would say, butting heads between 5 truck and the rest of the issue.
Mhm.
Well, I think one of the best things that smoothed it over, believe it or not, was housing being merged, because we moved into the issue headquarters and we moved in and you saw that we were confident. So it smoothed it over more, because now you're like, because it was more like, oh, you're 5 truck. You don't do jobs. Then they realized they did. I tell you, until the day I left, there were some guys in 1 truck and in 6 truck that were like, listen, why are you commuting? Come here. Come here. And it's funny. They didn't listen. They did what they wanted, which is good. Everybody does the thing. But after I left, and I don't think it was me, it was years later, they all came to 5 truck.
There you go. I
And
mean,
listen, after a time, you realize you're doing the same jobs anyhow.
right. It's
Why
the same
commute?
patch, same
Right.
unit. If
But
you can
why
work in your
commute? Why
backyard.
spend that money, spend that time when you could be doing it? But they had their reasons, and there were good reasons why too. They were in a good space. Every truck had its own flavor. Every truck had its own community. Every truck had its own different feel. And there were 10 different trucks and 10 different fields and 10 different, lunch rooms and 10 different places. So they were all great to work with. I loved it. On the late tours, I was everywhere. Pretty much I was in a truck once in a blue moon, but 90% of the time I was U4, U5. And especially before Patty retired, I was up in U4 pretty much every time. So I was in the Bronx and Manhattan. Those guys took care of me amazingly. It's not like I turned out of the quarters and in between jobs I can hang out. I was on my own, and they're like, we got you, boss. And they were some of the most amazing people I work with.
No, of course. That's the beauty. I know Sobachinsky. I haven't had the chance to interview him yet, but that's one of the things he mentioned in Sam Katz's Anytime, Anywhere, which is, he loved being a citywide supervisor. You weren't citywide. You had only a portion of the city, but nevertheless, that's 2 boroughs that you got to drive around in, because it's not just the ESU cops you get to back up. It's the patrol cops, too. You get to help out. A cop in need is a cop in need. Doesn't matter where you are. So getting the chance to do that and getting the chance to do it as a boss, I mean, that's Camelot right there. A couple of observations. Marcus James, it says, in my time from 1987 until 2002, nobody ever flew from any borough to 5 truck. Maybe that changed after I retired. And I'm thinking, I mean, somebody told me this a while ago, Marcus, and by the way, you should come on the show. Just saying. Where I think, wouldn't they have a fly car if somebody had to go to 5 truck? Wouldn't they have a fly car come get them and bring them to 5 truck? Or is that not correct?
No. I mean, when I was Hesse, no, we never had anybody fly into us. I'd have 6 truck or truck 6 if it was a bigger job. They'd come over to do a job, but they never covered our manpower. We always had to make sure we covered our trucks. We had to have our minimum mans. So that was up to our roll call and stuff. But no, they never did. And then after the unit was, and this is post 9/11. Because again, the order didn't come till 9/11. Then they were, we would fly here, they would fly to us, and then you just took your own vehicle to fly. That's what you did. But they know when I never had anybody fly in.
Okay.
So I was there from from 94ish through just short of 2001. You know?
So that covers the timetable there, because I'm like I said, I'm sure they fly now, but I was
Oh yeah.
wondering if that was the case back then. So actually, I'm glad you made that comment, Marcus, because that kind of clarifies the timetable of what the orders were, especially with the whole Hesse thing being what it was in the late '90s. And Mr. Latanzio says, Scott, tell them about the monkey.
The monkey? Which one? Is this the one that was in the house, or the one that an unnamed person shot in the head with a dart?
Let us know in the comments section, John.
Well,
once
so
he
we'll
does.
do a quick one. There was a smaller spider monkey that had gotten out, and one of the guys got him, and they had him in a tree, and they tried to dart him, and the things move, and it hit him in the head. And the picture on the newspaper was a monkey with the turban on his head. John might remember. Well, actually, John was probably on the other one. The one we're talking about, and this one was funny as heck. Actually, when you think about the funny show, I forgot about this one completely. Thank you, John. We got a call from a monkey. It was a late tour, so we get there. We went there, and we get the guy, and the guy had the whole web of his hand bit off. The whole web of his hand. This was not a spider monkey. This was a Gibbons monkey. Wasn't a chimpanzee, but he stood about 3 foot tall, standing on his head. The guys got there. The first two guys on the scene called me, said, Sergeant, going to be a biggie. And we get there, and the father, evidently the monkey, they kept it. It had his own room. In his room, where the monkey stayed in its own room, and the closet actually had a gate in front of it. If they had to lock it up, they put it in the closet and they closed it. But he had free run. The monkey had punched out a panel in the door and got free run in the house, and wound up biting. And while he was trying to corral him, bit off a big chunk of the guy's hand. So when we get there, you walk into a porch, and there's a set of French doors, right? And the guys had one of the panels broken out, and there's this monkey in the middle of the room, just like going completely EDP, and just every 5 minutes it would let out a scream, and I call it do the ricochet rabbit across the walls, run upstairs. You hear things breaking, you hear doing all this, and then come back in the middle of the room and just rock back and forth. Here's the thing about monkeys: they're not stupid. So what's the first thing you're going to do? Let's get a dart. Let's put a dart in a monkey. Let it calm down. We're going to get the monkey. Every time this monkey saw the gun, it took off and hid. There was nothing I could do. It took off and hid. So we tried a million times. We stood there. We tried to hide. One of the guys even got a shot. Finally, he came in and just tried to get a shot. The thing ran away. It was gone. We couldn't see it anymore. So now we got to do something. So the duty captain's on the scene. He goes, "What are you going to do?" So, well, this is not a small monkey. This thing's going to hurt one of us. If it bites one of us in the neck like he bit the guy in the hand, it's going to kill us. He says, "I want to go in with darts, but I tell you the truth, boss, I'm not going in without lethal force on this thing. Like, in New York City, you can't shoot animals there." I says, "I want to go in with a 12 gauge. Says, if this thing comes at us and I can't dart it, I'm shooting it." And he turns around and goes, "Okay." And I'm like, I didn't expect that answer. So either way, we go in. We got the shields. We're going in like we're doing a search warrant. And we search downstairs. We can't find anything. Well, we start going upstairs. And I'm telling you, you tell me the guy with the gun up there. You tell me there's a hostage up there. You tell me it's a terrorist up there. We go flying up the stairs like it's nothing. We were the biggest chicken bleeps I've ever seen in my life. We're like slowly, like on our knees, slowly walking up this. We're terrified of this stupid monkey. We go upstairs. We start going through the rooms. We go past the bathroom. And just as we do that, one of the guys said, "Hold on, Sergeant, I want to check the bathroom." Regular bathroom had a curtain closed on the thing. He goes to look in and he goes, "Oh, I don't see it." He goes, "Hold on a second." He goes to pull back the curtain, and there's the monkey in the bathtub. And he lets off the scream like a 12-year-old girl. This 6'5" guy lets the dart go. The dart hits the toilet, swings through the toilet, and sticks in the roof. Missed the monkey altogether.
Swing and a miss. He struck about.
Yes. So we go in. The monkey's scared. We hit him with the stick. We hit him with the stick. Let him calm down a little bit. Somebody comes in. This is the other funny part. Somebody comes in with the pole, with the rope, and he goes to put it in the neck, and the monkey gets his hand on it, and he's fighting us. We finally get this thing under control, and father wants nothing to do with it. But yeah, afterwards we were just peeing our pants how scared we were. This was the funniest thing in the world.
Well, there goes one of the rapid fire questions.
I don't
have to ask your funniest job now. I mean, you covered it. Same thing with uplifting.
Well, I got some of those too. But the other one, well, yes, John, is do you remember the pig job? Because we had a full-grown 300-pound boar, tusks and all, we had to take care of once.
Was Brian Hearn on this job by chance?
Brian, it could have been. It was an older job. It could have been Brian there. I know.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. We and then without getting into the full job, I'm a hunter, so I knew what we really needed for this job, and we didn't have it. But we put the guy that shot the dart the first time, and this thing turned and charged at us. And it was funny. I'm like, oh, I'll just jump on the REP. And I turned around, and everybody else was on the REP, and there was nowhere else for me to go. And I'm like, oh, this is not going to go well either. But yeah, that was another one of those.
Yeah, Brian was in ESU right up until 95 when he went to the Bomb Squad.
Bomb Squad, yep.
He's been on this show before. It's one of the more emotional episodes I've done. But I don't know if it was the same job. Tony Biondolillo worked with him on Staten Island. He also went to the Bomb Squad later on, where there was a job with a pig, and they were trying to corral it with the rope, and it didn't go so well, and they may or may not allegedly perhaps have broken the pig's neck by accident.
It could have been that one. I know. Well, here's what of them. There was 2 sows and a boar. It started on the 4 to 12. They corralled one of the sows, and then it was the boar and because we're in a big wetlands area, the boar and the other sow took off. The way we got it afterwards is that one of the sows got hit by a car, and the boar was guarding it, so we had to go get it. So this may have been similar to the same, because when we finally got the 22 caliber out. So we had a bigger dart in it. The way we dropped it actually hit it in the spine, and it dropped. So it wasn't walking anymore. Could have been a mix of the two. Could have been something different, because Brian was in the job. Brian was in Hesse before I got there.
Yeah, he was there.
So it could have been an older job, And Staten Island is a different borough, so there's a lot of wide open areas and stuff.
Well, what's the old joke about Staten Island, Richmond County Sheriff's Office?
Yep.
I'm sure you've heard it.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that, but there's also a little bit of big city policing. So and I'm glad, because I haven't, and shame on me. I mean, John's a 5-truck guy. Tony Lisi's a 5-truck guy. He's been on. But, I haven't had a lot of 5-truck guys on, and I'm glad I have you on tonight, in addition to those other 2 guys have been on before, because I think a lot of people kind of underrate Staten Island in terms of the uniqueness of the borough. And there's a good mix there. I mean, granted, there's a good mix in every ESU truck, but 5-truck had a lot of different nooks and crannies and facets that you just don't hear about until you talk to a 5-truck guy.
Yeah, well, like I said, to go off it, every truck had its own unique thing. For me, the Queens trucks between the airports and all the highways, that was a big thing for them. Yep. Manhattan, especially lower Manhattan, there was a lot of water jobs. Staten Island was also being an island, a lot of water jobs. 2-truck, 7-truck, huge amount of, perp jobs. You know what I mean? So everyone had its own flavor. 5-truck, yeah, with 5-truck, we were slower. But we had unique stuff that you didn't get elsewhere. We were talking about this, one of my, the biggest jobs. It's funny when you work at Staten Island, you always want to you say, I'm waiting for the radio to come up. Okay, 5-truck, we need you to go to New Jersey. Like you wanted to do that. And then I actually wound up doing it twice. We got one, well, actually, I'm sorry, 3 times, because I wasn't working the night that the two Bayonne cops went into the water.
Oh, yeah,
I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah,
so we went over for that. I wasn't working that night. But for me, once there was in Port Newark, they saw a stolen car driving into the water, and they didn't have divers. So they asked for us to come over, and we started doing diving. And we worked with the harbor. They actually put the divers. We rescued. But the big one for me, and this is actually, short of 9/11, this might be the biggest job I've ever been on. Do you remember Hurricane Floyd, 1999?
Yeah. I wasn't. Okay. Yeah, I've heard about it in school over the years. I wasn't around for it quite yet.
So about 1-2, we weren't really preparing for much, because the way they said you hit North Carolina, everything was supposed to be upstate New York. Mm-hmm. At 2 a.m, I actually get a call from headquarters. New Jersey called. We authorized it. We're sending. What did they say? We're sending 5-truck and an REP from 10-truck. Boundbrook, New Jersey, go help them. They need rescue. Aviation had 2 units up. And then when we were heading there, when I got there and I'm listening to aviation, what happened is Boundbrook, New Jersey, basically was flooded. And the Raritan River normally goes around it, wound up going straight through it. And there were thousands of people stuck in there. There was a whole block that was on fire. It was stuff we never trained for. It was chaos. So I'm listening to aviation, and I get on and I call the headquarters and say, listen, we need more. We don't have enough. We had 2 Zodiacs and a jet ski, and it was me, my driver, Truck 5. No, I'm sorry, just Adam 5, because I left Truck 5 on Staten Island because we needed it. So Adam 5 was pulling in a Zodiac, and I had Adam 10. That was it. That was all we had. He says, no, we already spoke. The governor of New York and the mayor of New York said until New Jersey use all their resources and they don't have any more, you're all they get. And I get there, and it was just an entire city underwater with a current going through it that was ungodly. There was an entire block on fire. We're going in there. So when we first get there, I get in the Zodiac with the 2 10 truck guys. Right, 2 of my 5 truck guys go on another Zodiac. We go to start the jet ski. We couldn't start it. So I abandoned that guy. Says, as soon as you get it, come meet me. We're rescuing people out of the 2nd story windows, ducking under electrical cables. There's gas mains going off. There's cars floating. People put boats on the street. There were actual boats, full cabin cruisers going down the block. And at one point, the water came up so quick, the fire department was fighting that fire, the Bombrook Fire Department. Well, the water came up, their apparatuses were underwater, and they were trapped on top of this burning building. I had to drop everything, turn around, and rescue 2 truck engines. It was 2 engines and 2 trucks. I had to rescue them off the building. We had to take, until we got help, we had to take, we estimated about 2,000 people out, and we were pulling them out. And then by the end of the day, just as the morning came, and then Harbor started showing up with the bigger boats, more ESU guys started showing up. The mayor says, town-wide evacuation mandatory. Now we had to go evacuate the town. So this started at 2 in the morning. I didn't finish up till like 7, 8 o'clock at night. Exhausted beyond belief. It was just, we didn't train for whitewater rescue. Our boats weren't made for working in the rivers. So we had the smaller boats. When you went to go across the street, you had to aim upstream and you hopefully got across. It was insane. You know, it was an insane thing. It was one of the biggest jobs he did, short of 9/11.
Another story I'd never heard before, but tonight I heard for the first time. I mean, I knew of Hurricane Floyd. I didn't know about ESU's involvement. Thank you for sharing that. I don't even know how to follow that up. That's an incredible story. I never knew that.
It was big. And Harbor was there. Aviation was there. We dumped up one of the boats. 2 of our guys came afterwards, and they were actually on a civilian boat. You know, and they were working, and at one point the guy driving it flipped it. I had a baby stuck underneath the boat, and they got him out. You know, we flipped one boat, and it was funny. I guess the water must have been coming down, and luckily for us, we started ripping up Zodiacs. They started trying, when they were trying to go, you didn't know where a fence was, and they'd tear open the bottom of the boat. And luckily, you know, for us, we didn't. You know, my son's going to tell me, my son's going to yell at me if I don't tell you this story. One of the funniest things of this, and a tragic thing. I call this the smart dog, stupid cats. Not a cat person, but smart dog, stupid cats. So in the midst of all this, they started open different areas off, and I'm with the group. And somebody goes and pointing over across the street that there's this cat barely hanging off a 2nd story balcony, and it's having a hard time, right? So I'm like, and just as we saw that, they actually put over the only 2 people that died in Bound Brook. There was a disabled mom and her son. And he was in the basement, and she was there, or he was there, and they couldn't find him. So they asked for us to go down and dive down. We had our dive, we try and find him, you know. And I was going to back them up, and the guy's like next to him goes, Sarge, look up on the hill. And I look up on the hill, and every media outlet in the world was there filming this. What we did tonight, if you leave that cat, because it was right there in the open, if you leave that cat there, all the positive we're going to get out of this is gone. So I already had another unit going, you know, different guys going over to help, you know, search for the people. So we go to get this cat. Now, what's the one thing cats hate more than anything else? Water. Exactly. So the cat had a choice: jump in the water or get on the clean boat with us. You know what the cat chose? The cat chose to jump in the water. And the funny thing is, the way the water was running, if you run in between the houses, like up the driveways, it wasn't. But between the backyard and the front yard in this particular house, the current was running like 5 to 8 knots. It was ripping through there. So I'm watching the cat. He goes to the end of the house, and the current catches it, and the cat is gone. I just see it ripped off. So we're like, well, the cat's gone. There's nothing I can do about it. So, okay, we go about, we keep doing a rescue. So much later in the day, we're evacuating the rest of the town. And we turn around, and we're happy to be driving down this one block, and same thing. Yes. And there's this dog, same situation, hanging on a balcony. Here's the difference. We pull up to this dog. And again, there's these guys wearing the dry suits, and we got all these scary looking things. This dog couldn't get in this boat quicker. Circles twice one way, circles twice the other, and he lays down. This dog was in a boat with us for the next 2.5 hours. He wasn't getting out of this boat. So finally, when my relief came, they says, you need to get out and take a break and hand the boat over. We had to carry the dog out of the boat. Stupid cat, smart dog.
A rarity. Usually it's a great story. And Hurricane Floyd, September 1999 is when that went down. And Steve Iorato put in the chat, you might need to do a show, meaning me, on just the flood and the response to it alone. And I think you're right, and I think you're going to have to come back for a part 2. Just to go.
That was a big job. I mean, and to add to the hilarity of it, was my wife's 30th birthday.
Oh, there's that too. What a time. What a time. What a time for things to coincide. You mentioned to me off the air, of course, you talked about 9/11 a bit earlier. So of course, that's the biggest job you had. That when you and I were doing the dry run yesterday, a certain individual about saved you and about 20 other guys' lives that morning. So I'll let you take it from the top. Were you working that morning? And if not, just tell me where you were when that job came over the air.
So I was doing a late tour. I started on the 10th, working through the late tour. I was ready to go home. You know, we had the overlap waiting to, tell us. Right. Teddy Sergio was the other sergeant who was taking over for me. And, I told him, this is what we got, this is what we're doing, what maintenance and stuff we had to do. And I was sitting there watching the TV and actually first, but didn't come over with what it was. It came over, as a plane hitting the trade center, but they didn't say what, you know what I mean? So, in New York, it's not rare, but it's not often, we'll have small planes, helicopters hit something. Turn the TV on and I'm like, oh yeah, this is not a small plane, right? Same thing. I just, I was dressed. I told them, leave me a car. Everybody started heading out, waited for me. Jumped in an REP. We're going across. We're going down the Brooklyn Queens Expressway. The second plane flew past us. We watched it hit. Now we're trying to decide, how do we get it, right? Do we take the Brooklyn Bridge? Do we take the Battery Tunnel? By this time already, they had one lane closed, ambulance and police. So going into the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, it was like, a bunch of fire apparatus, 2 or 3 ambulances, 5 or 6 police cars. And just now imagine that going for miles, So I'm saying to myself at first in my head is, well, terrorists, you put a bomb in the Battery Tunnel and you're taking out whatever you took out already, you're taking out more. That's their thing. You attack the first responders. But I'm thinking the Brooklyn Bridge is a target, right? So I'm like, and the thing wound up being deciding factor is if I go try to leave, I'm never getting in. I come out of the Battery Tunnel, I'm half a block from the World Trade Center. So we come in the Battery Tunnel. Long and short, in my mind, I already have that we're going to go into the second building because I figured there's people in the first pile that was hit. I'm set up for rescue. I got all my guys set up for rescue. We go to the first mobilization point, which was Vesey and West. What we're talking about is Thomas Sullivan, right? He was a Hesse guy. He was a 5-truck guy. He had transferred to 6-truck, and he was there already. Obviously, seeing me, and I'm jumping out. And I got my rescue gear on. I got ropes. We're grabbing medical gear. We don't know. We're bringing what we can. And Tommy looks at me straight in the eye and goes, Scott, he goes, we don't know what this is yet. We're not putting anybody else in the building. We have a team in building 1. We have a team in building 2. Nobody else is going in until we know what we have to bring up. We know what we need. He goes, but what we ought to do is a terrorist attack. We're securing the site. I got people coming in from the east. I got people coming in from the north. I got people coming in from the west. You got the west. From the south. You got the west side, right? And matter of fact, he goes, just as I was driving up West Street to the thing, that's when Mayor Giuliani had his first press conference, right across the street from the Trade Center. And that's where the fire command post was really set up. So he goes, go to the mayor's office, see his detail. Does he want ESU to add to his detail? Because he had his intel guys. Does he want uniform guys? So I took all my rescue gear off, dumped it right on the floor, heavy vest on. Two of the guys with me, Kenny Pepper and Ronnie Richards, grabbed machine guns, and we're hopping off to there. But he did that. That was it. He also said a bat truck, which is all our Scott bottles. He sent them off somewhere else, and he saved from six. What was it? Probably it was 6 truck, 7 truck, and 5 truck. Didn't let us go into buildings because he sent us elsewhere because that was the way it was supposed to be done. That's the only reason I wasn't in the building. That's why the other 5 guys with me weren't in the building. That's the other 6 trucks. That's why they weren't in the buildings. Was because of what Tommy did that day. You know, thank him to death. I mean, you know how it was. I'm sure you talked to a lot of people. It could be I was standing here and 2 feet later I wasn't, and you died and I did. It was a matter of where and when. Again, I was standing at the fire command post. They all got wiped out.
Yeah. And there's a picture there of Gansey talking to Commissioner Fee and Chief of Department Gansey, I'm saying, and a few other guys. And
Right.
none of those guys made it. And I always remember the story Commissioner Nigro said a little while ago. I had the opportunity to have him on, and he didn't say it on this show. He talked about the day, but he said it on another podcast where he was like, somebody came up, I think it was an engineer, and said to the guys at the command post on the FD side, you know, these buildings can come down. And Chief Gansey turned around and said, well, who the F said that? Not that he didn't believe the guy. He did.
Right.
But he didn't, I think, and I'll never forget Tom Von Essen telling me this years ago when he was on the show, about 6 years ago now, when he was like, it's not that I didn't think the buildings could come down. It's that I never thought they could come down that quickly. And I think that just about sums up everybody's perspective. The fire burns long enough. Yeah, there is a collapse danger.
Right.
To have it come down in 102 minutes, I don't think anybody could imagine that.
I was at the command post. I had a different mission. We were doing that thing. When I first got there, one of the fire chiefs asked us to do a bomb sweep. Yeah. And we did that. But we were talking about it and we were kind of planning. We had an idea what was going on. And granted, I learned a lot more about that than I ever knew before. They were talking about internal collapses. They were talking about damage from the plane trapping people and maybe having to go in and move debris to get to the people. That's all they were thinking about. And even if they were thinking about, like, even when the first tower collapsed, nobody was thinking pancake. Everybody was thinking it was going to lean over. Nobody was thinking pancake because I'll tell the story. I don't remember hearing anything. I don't remember feeling anything. And it had to be loud as crap, and I had to feel something. And I just, for some reason, looked up and I saw the top 20 stories of the building kind of like shift down and towards me. And at first I'm saying, well, I'm across the street. I'm far enough away. And, and I'm like, then my intelligent brain said, no, you need to get in. I knew I wasn't out running. And I'm like, at least let me get in. I figured it was going to lean over towards me, the rest of the building. I'm like, let me get under some other building, at least put a building between me and it. Maybe. And I was right at Financial Plaza. And that's how I wound up in the underground garage, because that's what I thought. Nobody thought it was coming straight down. Nobody. Not that fast, and nobody ever thought of that. We thought we were going to deal with what was going on inside, maybe the top floor or two, or more internal collapses more than anything else. That was completely, but again, getting into it, I'm sure you have, that was a very uniquely built building. And I don't think there's ever been a building built in that particular way again.
You're right. It was built outside the fire code of New York City to tell you how unique it was. And you've never seen a building, to your point, ever, especially after that day, built outside the fire code. If anything, these buildings now are heavily compliant with it. And for good reason. I remember Danny Cohen saying something similar. He was working that morning in the A team. He had been away from 2 Truck at the time. Otherwise, he might have been on 2 Truck's rig that morning. And the only guy from 2 Truck that came back was Eddie Torres. But he was saying on the way down, same thing. One of the old timers, when the A team was riding down, said they could come down. And when they got there, people were jumping, so they didn't go in right away. And that saved their lives. He's like, listen, if that building came down a bit more to the south, Mike, there'd be a few more memorial pictures up, on the wall at headquarters. And
yeah.
It's the little things like that. I'll ask you. You knew all these guys, especially John and Vinny, because they were in housing with you and housing rescue. I know it hurt, but we always like to focus on the fond memories of these guys. It's important to remember how they lived. So when you look back on these guys, especially John and Vinny, what are your favorite memories of them?
John was just, the man never didn't have a smile on his face. I mean, he was just, I think it was, he was a gigantic human being, like a giant grizzly bear, but it was like the grizzly is nicest guy in the world. Anytime he needed any help, you remember I switched in the middle. I was cop in the beginning. Then I got promoted in the middle of it, and I came in. So he was there helping me both ways. You know what I mean? And he was there. Vinny, again, just you could never say there was no. I could never think of a bad word about him. You know, whether he died or not, it just, you know, he was just, again, just an easygoing guy, willing to get his head in there, willing to do the work. You know, always first one in line, volunteer. It was just, they were great human beings. It was just, and the thing is, you know, everybody in the unit is amazing. We lost some of the best people we ever had there. You know,
Right.
we did. And the bad part is it's not ending. We just recently lost one of the best people we ever had.
Yeah.
Paulie Hargrove, you know, I mean, and it's not ending, you know, it's just not, you know, we talk about Pat Murphy. I was a body for him, you know, we were talking about the two guys I was with, Ronnie Richards, one of the first guys to go.
Yep.
You know, and then just
Another bomb squad guy too.
Yeah, and he transferred to bomb squad too. Yeah, I mean, and it's not ending. It's every other day. It still is. You know, John Mercado.
Yeah,
you know,
I was going to bring him up. Yep, he was the next.
You know, just the other day. You know, and it was funny when it happened. I was at a 9/11, you know, tribute when it came over, and I'm listening to it. I'm like, you know, and it doesn't stop. You know, and I just keep knocking on wood. You know, pray God not me, because we're breathing the same air. You know, why him, not me?
Yeah,
you know?
it's tough. It's, you know, and with Coughlin, I remember the story. One of the guys were telling in a tribute video that Arlene Harrison helped film for the guys and for Danny Richards from the bomb squad, where Coughlin's line, "What's up, lad?" He called everybody lad. That was just so interesting, you know, to the point where they put it on the side of Ford truck in memory of him, lad. Just simple as that.
Yeah,
you know?
no, it was they were just some of the best of the best, you know, and just to find out, and you know, just to find out that they were gone, you know, and you just, you know, you're in denial, you're in pure denial. You know what I mean? And you're trying to do your best, and you know what it is. You know, after the buildings came down, you knew nobody was coming out. You knew it. There was no way it was coming out. You know, and you're
just hoping against hope.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it is. You're praying for a miracle. That's all you're doing. But in the back of your mind, you know, especially once you start getting on the site, you start working on the site, you know, it takes you 40 minutes to get in 100 yards, you know, and then you have these beams that are just nothing beams that big, and you can't move them, let alone cut them. Well, what do you do if you find somebody? You know, we do whatever we could. I mean, obviously we did, but
it wasn't going to be easy. It just wasn't. No, and you know, I'll ask you from a leadership standpoint. Thank you for sharing your story on that as well. And I'm not minimizing the other losses that ESU suffered that day, but just from a seniority / leadership standpoint. John DeLera, 14 years in emergency service. Ronnie Clover, about the same time in emergency service. Tommy Langone, who had rescue experience from his time as a volunteer fireman as well, 10 years in emergency service.
Yep.
And that's
John
not
Curtin.
even count. Mike Curtin, same thing. Sergeant in the Marine Corps. John Coughlin, an experienced leader. Rod Gillis, an experienced leader. All that leadership lost on that day. And for the guys that are in positions of rank, like yourself at the time, that is not, you can never replace those guys, but you got to step into the best of your capabilities. So tell me, just from a leadership role alone, trying to lead the guys, the new guys coming in and the following STS classes during a time like that, where you're, as you said, you're missing some of the best you got, your most senior guys and your best leaders.
You know, I could talk about myself. You know what? We had some great leaders still there, you know, but
for sure. Yeah.
One of the things you had to do is you had to look at the team you had, and, you know, you the first thing we're looking to find our guys. I mean, we're also, you know, we're not putting them above our people, you know, and the other people there, but we're really jonesing. I'm like, listen, let's not lose anybody else. If we find somebody, we're going to do whatever we're going to do to find them. But you have to know when to let the leash off. You have to know when to pull the leash back. You had to watch people to make sure. One of the biggest things to make sure you had to watch them to make sure they were okay in their mind. You know what I mean? Because sometimes if you're not there when you start working in a thing like that, okay, you need to take a few days off. You know, I know for a fact for me, I could talk about me. I had to go there every day. Every day I could possibly go there, I had to go there. I don't know. I couldn't. I know when we went to the trucks, so you went to the trucks. Okay, I need 3 guys from each truck to go to the trade center, and they know, okay, Zink's going. Who else is going? They just knew already. It was a way it was done, and there were other people like that, and it wore on you not being able to find people. So as on a leadership side, you had to watch the other people. You had to watch them. You had to make sure that they were in the right place, and you weren't sure they weren't burning out. And you had to make sure they were also giving the right. Some people we had people that did not want to go back there. They didn't. They would, for whatever their reasons
Understandably.
were, and you had to make sure that, you took care of it. And it was understanding. I mean, God, hopefully it's the worst thing I ever seen or experienced in my life. You know what I mean? And then you start recovering people and you see what's there. And then again, everything I was there, it wasn't the first time I saw it, but it was the scale of it and the enormity of it and just what it was. You know what I mean? It wasn't just a building collapse. And it wasn't just a 110-story building. It was the World Trade Center, and it was a terrorist attack. And what else is coming? And where? And you had to basically keep everybody safe, because that's my job. I want to make sure everybody's safe, everybody I can. I want to keep everybody mentally safe. So it was a challenge. It was a challenge we all had to do, and all the bosses that were there really stepped up. But it's hard to come back from that. The experience and the camaraderie, and it's hard. It's hard.
I can imagine. Yeah, for sure. And I'll ask you a few more questions before we hit the rapid fire. And that is, I did a show last November with John Bushing and Anita Rosado. And they were, I think John brought it up at one point when he was talking about winding down his career, and he retired in 06, as did Anita, that somebody asked him, do you have another 9/11 in you? And John's answer was no. Another major event like that, I just don't. And that's the reason why him and Anita left in 06, amongst a few other people as well, once they hit their 20, and a few people in the years before, like Glenn Klein or Ronnie Griffin,
Yep.
who have also had on the show. So for you, though, wasn't quite the case. 2005 came around and you stayed, and it had been a whirlwind couple of years getting ESU built back up to its capabilities and manpower before 9/11, all the counterterrorism measures. As you said, it can burn somebody out. So when you were at that crossroads in 05, having hit the 20, do I stay or do I go? What was it that made you say, you know what, let me stay a little while longer?
There was no thought in my mind of leaving. It wasn't. I loved what I was doing. I loved the people I work with. It's hard to say that. You love what you're doing, dealing with people's misery and disaster. But I loved what I'm doing. I wanted to do. In my case, I was actually probably looking to do. I said 25. I was possibly looking at 30. You got to realize I worked on late tours. I was on the late tours. I was the senior in emergency and senior in rank. Where was I going?
Not bad.
The issue by that later on, not at 20, but once I was closer to 25, I was second senior in rank, or third senior in rank, second senior in the unit of all the sergeants in the issue. Where was I going? I loved what I did. I didn't have anything that I was looking to do after work. The same Staten Island. I lived in Staten Island. I loved what I was doing, and I never gave it a second thought. If you ask me that same question, yeah, there's another one in me. I'm still there. I'll still do it. I'm still working with the guys. I'm still working with the local police department, doing stuff.
Right.
Working with the local sheriffs. Putting in my place where I can. Physically, would I be able to do it? Probably not then. I'm out. You know what I mean? I wouldn't. Mentally, I'm not looking for. I wouldn't look forward to it, but I would be the first one walking in with everybody else.
I think that's the ESU mentality. It doesn't leave you. You can leave ESU, but the ESU never leaves you, if that makes any sense. And I know for you it does. It doesn't matter how long you've been out. It doesn't matter where you worked. That's a mentality that never dies, ever.
No, I agree. And that was one of the things too. Like when we bring people in, even if it was your best friend, you didn't do anything to embarrass the unit. If they weren't, listen, there was good cops and not. It was a different type of issue. Right, and I can't tell you what it was and what it wasn't, but you knew. And hey, put in the word for me to get in. And you know what? If the guy wasn't a fit, or hey, I love you to death, but yeah, no, this is enough for you.
Yeah.
You know,
Time to go.
Or not so much when, if you're going to get in on your own, you're not getting help by me. Because, prior to 9/11, you didn't get in unless somebody in the issue said, yeah, come on in. They changed it up a little bit, but it was still a big part of it. You needed a recommendation from somebody in the issue. But, the people were there for a reason. They were there because they wanted to be there, and they wanted to be there and they wanted to do what they did. And it became a lifestyle. You know what I mean? It sounds like a weird way to say it, but it's just,
No, it makes sense.
That goes into you never leave it.
Right. Right.
Because
even now in retirement. Look at Rima. Yep. Look at Rima.
Yeah.
That's a perfect crystal clear example of it being a lifestyle.
When you say that, I'll go back to 9/11. What happened in 9/11? Because this is what I would imagine in my end of it. All the retired guys came out.
Mm-hmm.
And what they did is they took over the command post, and they took over the cash, and they took over the rehabs, and they took over watching over us, because they've been there and done that. But they couldn't go in the pile, whether the job wouldn't let them or they physically couldn't. But they could take everything else away from us, and took all that away from us, so we could just concentrate on going in that pile, and that was it. And they would also knew what to look for, and they could see it because they weren't there. You know what I mean? So yeah, they just right off the boom, there they are. Here we are. And it happened at the fire department too. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
All the retired guys.
Oh yeah,
they came
I've heard
right
those
in,
stories too.
and
Mm-hmm.
I just can't see it not happening again.
Yeah.
Hopefully never will.
But if it did, you'd have guys that step up. Steve Iarato, actually, I'm glad you brought this up, because we get anthrax afterwards. There's still a lot of work to be done, and then anthrax comes along. Flight 587 in the Rockaways in November of 2001. Were you working for that?
I was almost one of the first guys there. Yeah.
Wow.
I was working late to us.
Tell that story.
Actually, I think I was at the time. I was actually, when you talk about anthrax, I was in one of the response cars, and the job came over, and we went there, and I was one of the first ESU vehicles there. 9 truck was obviously there right away. 7 truck got there pretty quick because they cut through the Rockaways and stuff. But we were one of the first people there. Yeah, and it was a weird scene because it was an airplane crash, but it was pretty confined. You expect the airplane crashes to be spread out everywhere, but they, I was at the job. We had people on site. There was still a fire going, so we really couldn't get into the site itself. The fire department was doing their part. We started working around the outside, just checking the houses for outside for falling debris, make sure everybody was okay. Around the morning came, because I had to get my car back. They sent me back. But they left a bunch. Matter of fact, I was talking to 2 of the guys that were with me on the Boundbrook job, were actually the guys that took out the last remains. It was the pilot and the co-pilot. Once it went into the house, and they took the people out. They were pulling the remains out. So basically, the plane came straight down, and it took out 2 houses. Mm-hmm. Luckily, I don't think there was anybody in the houses. The lucky part of it is that there was a school or some sort of daycare center like half a block away, and it was fully occupied when it happened. But that was like, and that was after, come get me. And we're like, okay, they're listening, and that was a tough job.
Yeah, I can imagine. And the first I heard about it, and I didn't even know it had happened until years ago. I remember Mariano. I'm a diehard Yankee fan.
Yep.
And Mariano Rivera was giving an interview, and this is Yankees lost the World Series to the Diamondbacks that year. He gives up the big hit to Gonzalez in Game 7, and Enrique Wilson, which if you're a really hardcore Yankee fan, you remember Enrique Wilson, the Pedro Martinez killer, was supposed to be on that flight. And because had the Yankees won the World Series and closed it out, he would have been on 587. But because they lost, he ended up taking a different flight. And I never forget Mariano saying, I'm glad we lost the World Series if it means I still have my friend. And that's the first time I ever heard about that job.
Yeah, no, that was when, what was it? Was it a fireman or a cop was doing an interview? It's like, yeah, come get me. Yeah, I'm right here. And initially everybody thought that was in response to that. Nobody thought it was a, mechanical failure. Everybody thought that had to be a terrorist attack. So you're thinking on that, like, well, here we go again kind of thing. But yeah, that was a rough job.
Yeah,
You know?
and if quite a few guys were at the field, I think I remember, and Marcus James was contributing that comment as well.
Yep.
I think Billy Kennedy, he was, because I remember him telling me that story. Billy Kennedy
They
was
saw
at
it
the
from the
field
field.
with the STS class he was training,
Yep.
and for the
Yep.
STS class that was coming in right after that event, that was kind of their first, hey, welcome to emergency service job, and it's just,
Well,
man,
as an odd point of that, one of the houses was a active housing inspector.
real, wow. So it really is a small world and an eerie
Oh,
connection. Yeah,
you
I
know.
mean, it's just, I don't blame people for thinking that, though. I mean, it's 2 months after the most devastating terrorist attack ever, with aircraft involved as
Oh,
weapons.
and then
Who wouldn't
somebody
think that?
calls out the terrorists,
Yeah,
and then it happens in New
right,
York. You know,
right.
that was hard. You know, one of the things I'm sure one of the things I told every new kid that came in and everybody else, and yeah,
That's
and
where you said it. Yep.
yep, what I would say is this: that you come in piss and vinegar, right? You come out of STS, you're already an experienced cop, and you hear about all the stories, and you see all the things, and you want your piece of it. And I tell them, don't ever wish for the big job. Because here's what it is. It's going to happen whether you want to or not. It's going to happen when you least expect it. It's going to happen when you're least prepared for it. And once it happens, you're praying it's never going to happen again. Let it happen. It's going to happen. Just do your job every day. And I think that's what made us the greatest, what we do. And the greatest unit, what it was, is because everybody was so professional in what they did. They hunkered down. They did their training. They took their emotions. They put them on the side. You did what you had to do, and you dealt with the consequences later. And that's what they are now.
I think that sums it up perfectly, because I'm trying to remember who it was. Nick Bavaro, who I'm trying to get on the show as well. Nick's a friend. And he was mentioning, it's funny, Mike, that a lot of guys before 9/11, he got to ESU in 99 as a lieutenant. He's like, before 9/11, anytime people would see me, they'd be like, all right, boss, see you at the big one. And he's like, he noticed that after 9/11, they stopped saying that. He never heard that again for the rest of his career. He'd never heard see you
Yeah,
at the big one again.
because
The big one
they're
happened.
terrified that it might happen again.
Yep. And the big one, unfortunately killed a lot of friends that he had, and I think that's now too where I work in a civilian capacity for a fire department here in Connecticut, and I do the social media for them. And I got the chance to go, part of my job is going to fires and documenting to our operations, where we can see from an investigative standpoint, here's what occurred, here's what we did. If it needs to be reviewed by the fire marshal's office, it can be reviewed. I hadn't caught one, and I was itching for one, jonesing for one, because I'm a buff with a capital B. We catch one, and without going into too much detail, you see the calamity of it afterwards, and you see how it just destroys people's lives, and you're like, why did I want this? Listen, I'm glad I saw the guys do a good job, but this hurt so many people. This is going to impact them for quite a long time, if not the rest of their lives. So,
Right.
my mentality's changed to where, if I'm not going in hoping for a fire in this instance, or a big job, if you will, I
Right.
just hope now that if it happens when I'm there and I get to go with the guys, that I get to see the guys do a good job, and that everything goes well, and that the circumstances can be mitigated by an effective response.
Yeah, that was a lot of my thoughts for my career and stuff. I was jonesing to do what I was trained to do. On the back of your mind, you're thinking, if I'm doing what I'm trained to do, somebody's really in bad trouble. What I became, and I morphed it into, if it's trouble, that I can do my job well enough to make a difference, help people, and help somebody and save somebody's life or change somebody's direction. That what I morphed into, not wanting to do it. And it's a slight difference, but doing it to the best of my ability, being able to use my experience and my thing to do it and help it. And that gave me the satisfaction. Not that I was at some big job and I got to things. It was that I was able to do what I was trained to do and help it and make sure my people that were under me and my friends came into and out of it the way they were. And that became my driving motivation, towards the end. Trust me, did I want to leave? I didn't want to leave. I wanted. I was going to do 30, probably,
Circumstances got in the way, and and
Yep.
ended up in 2009 after a very good run, and here he is. The incomparable. And by the way, I'm glad he's here because Steve had a job in 10 truck the other day where there was a suicidal individual threatening to jump. It wasn't just Steve, it was a team of emergency service cops. But of course, Steve's the most senior one of the bunch. And I'm not saying that facetiously. He actually is right now after he quits
he is.
retirement. He has the most time out of anybody in the unit. They were able to talk that gentleman down, get him down safely, and get him to a hospital where he's hopefully he is receiving the medical treatment he needs, and hopefully this can be the path towards a better life for that gentleman. So good work, Steph. One of many good jobs he's done.
Steve has to be the last housing guy there.
He is. There's nobody else. There's nobody else
just...
when he leaves in 2030, and I'm not kidding. That's when he wants to leave because he's going to age out. That'll officially close the door on housing, at least that chapter of housing.
One of the guys I miss the most. And part of the thing, me being out here, it's real hard because I can't get back for things. When I miss seeing guys at things, and it just, it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's no, and John points out, there's no transit either. I think Mark Porter was the last transit rescue guy, and he retired a few years ago. So that particular chapter is closed for transit. It's going to close in a few years for housing.
Yeah, no, and it was a good run. I'll tell you, it changed the unit for a good way.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a bad thing. I almost turn around and say that housing took the issue over. It wasn't we didn't absorb we absorbed them. I think, XO the unit, we took over the admin, we took over the school. It wasn't, it went both ways, but it was a joke. We used to joke them all the time. You didn't take over us, we took over you. And then the transit was the same way, the same guys. There's a good.
Well, look at Anita and John. They were running the school at the end. Anita and John were in charge of the training. Andy Stromfeld was down there too.
Yep, it was a good group of people. I'm immensely proud of the people I work with and the things that we accomplished, and I'm immensely proud of the people where they are afterwards. And I just, I hope the city realizes the resource that they have, because when we talk about 9/11, you talk about a thing. There's some great units around the country. There are some amazing police. There's some amazing fire units. There is no other city in the world that would have been able to do what we did that day.
Nope, I agree.
And they can't. They can't. They don't. And I hope we haven't lost it, because unfortunately it's going to happen again somewhere. But I think they can hopefully look at that and say, this is what the blueprint of what it should be is.
I can tell you they haven't, because I've gotten the chance to go down to Floyd Bennett recently and see the active guys, and Steph can tell you this because he's still there. They haven't. They're ready. Do I want them to have that happen to them? No, and I hope that it does not. But in today's day and age, with the unpredictability of the times that we live in, chances are it might. And if it does, I know emergency will be ready to go. And I know FD will be ready to go. And I know that Port Authority Police too. Everybody will be.
God forbid, sorry, I didn't bring them into this too, because those are some amazing people I work with there also. And then what I can tell you is, if it does happen, I'll be there again. You know what I mean? If you can get me there and I can be there to help and do the same thing what the retired guys did for me, I'll be there doing that again. And it just, listen, don't take this the wrong way, but I escaped New York, and you can tell every time I go back, because you can hear the screaming from here. It's my family dragging me back. It's changed, but it still doesn't mean I wouldn't go back to help it.
Right. Well, of course. The city is, and the pendulum always swings. The city's not in a great spot right now for reasons we don't have to get into, but a lot is going on, and not a lot of it is very good. But nevertheless, even then, good times, not so good times, the turnaround in the 90s and the 2000s, the crappy times we're in right now. The one constant is the guys are always ready to do the job. And no matter what, they lace their boots up every day, and they go out there and they do the job. We just saw that again this past week with Officer Diller, now Detective Diller, I should say. Detective First Grade Diller, his line of duty death, where, he was out there doing the job. But unfortunately, he was killed in the line of duty doing that job. And, the beat rolls on. No matter the generations, the beat definitely rolls on. This has been,
there was something put up on our command a few weeks after 9/11 started. I wish I had taken a picture of it back then, but we didn't have. And I'm going to paraphrase it. It just goes back in the head all the time, and it kind of apropos for the way things are right now. Remember what we did today. Remember the sacrifices made. Remember the people lost, because soon enough, everybody else won't. Because I do remember, and then you talk to everybody, you talk to the support we got, and this gives me hope for the country. The support we got on that day and after those days, the entire city and everybody was amazing. Soon enough, everybody forgot that, and it's the way of life it is. And I still remember one of the first things somebody told me. He says, if you came in this job for a pat in the back, you're in the wrong place. And then, that's also one of the things, I guess, sometimes between the fire and the police department, they're not going to good things. The fire department goes, you're having a bad day too. Mm-hmm. The difference is it's a perception. Again, I was told this in the police academy from one of my best instructors. Every time a police or fireman shows up, oh, great, thank God the fire department's here. You don't hear that with us. And you just know that coming into the job and just don't expect elsewhere. It's kind of what I love doing about the issue, because there were times where it was, oh my God, thank God they're here. You know what I mean? And you got some positive reinforcement instead of constant negative. But it was.
Yeah, and what's the old motto you heard at the top of the show? When a civilian needs help, they call the police. When the police need help, they call the emergency service unit. Calling them then, still calling them now, and they're going to keep calling them. Chief Lukash is here, and he says, great job, Scott. Loved working with you. You would always ensure the job was run perfectly, and you would tell me you don't need to respond. We got this. Love the late tour bosses, men and women. Good to see you, Chief Lukash. He was on the show a little bit.
Yeah, I saw that. I miss him too much, too. He was a great guy.
Great guy. He was a great guest.
Great bosses, and it made your job easier when you work with somebody that was behind you.
Mm-hmm. Of course. And I can tell guys definitely love working for him. It's now time for the rapid fire, and honestly, this conversation flew by. We're coming up on the 2-hour mark, but it doesn't feel like it. It's been a really fun back and forth with you. You already answered funniest call, because it doesn't get much funnier than the story you told earlier involving the monkey. But I guess I could still go into uplifting. Hurricane Floyd's pretty uplifting, but you said you had others. So besides that job, what's another uplifting one you went on?
Okay, so you know what? I'm gonna have to go back to my housing days. Mm-hmm. Well, I really had to think about that. It was funny. I think of all my worst jobs. I'm thinking, what was really good? And it was funny, both of them, and I have to say both because it came from the same place. Two different things. In housing in Staten Island, there was a senior housing development, right? Cassidy Coles, right? And it was a beautiful place, and all elderly people there. And there became a robbery pattern there, so they put us on a steady foot post there, right? And so we're walking. There's nothing going on there. I mean, this is a beautiful place. The DA had his mother there. The borough commander had his mother in that place. It was a beautiful place. So we're walking the hallways, and this typical housing, you never go home hungry or tired. You know what I mean? Because you always had somebody invite you in somewhere to feed you or to take care of you. So either way, I'm walking the hallway, and the door opens up, and there's an elderly woman, and she says, "Hey, can you come over and come in for a second?" I'm like, "Oh, what's up? What's going on?" So no, we just want to say hi and talk to you. So I walk in the building. I walk into the apartment. There's an elderly couple, and first thing I notice on the wall is a picture of, it's got to be from the 1950s, a police officer. You have an old high neck collar and the dress uniform, and it's there, and there's this little medallion and stuck in the side of the frame, and they start talking to me. They're feeding me, like, yeah, this is our son. He was a police officer. We love policemen. I says, and after we're ready to go, and they listen, we want to do something for you. I'm like, well, no, this was enough. You don't got to do any more. So no, you don't understand. She goes, we gave this medallion to my son when he came on the police department, and he did 25 years on the police department, and luckily he never got hurt. Seriously, he never got shot, and he retired. We want you to have this. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, here I am. Well, this didn't come into, doesn't make much of it, but I'm Jewish. And I'm thinking this is a St. Michael's medallion. And I'm like, do I really need that? But like, I'm not really super religious, but I'm like, you know what? I'm very superstitious. And this guy carried this for his entire career and he didn't get hurt. And these people are looking to give it to me. And I'm telling you now, to the day I retired, that was in my wallet. And I it's something like that, right? So that was one. And there was another one, same project, but we actually happened to go on a call for a person down. We go there, and I don't know if you remember the old housing guys, if I ever told you, we had the keys to every apartment. Yep. We had the master keys. Lose your gun first. Don't ever lose the master keys. You know? So we had the keys, and we go into the apartment, and we found a woman, and she had fallen down. She was, falling down for a while, and she was hurting. And we get EMS. We see, we get her over there, and we start talking to her. It turns out she was a retired police dispatcher from California. And family had moved to here, but they moved away, and she was there. She had nobody. And then it became a regular thing. And me and my partner, we came in and checked on her once a week, once every other week, just to make sure she was okay. And she just loved to see us. And again, the same thing is coming into a place and going to see somebody that smiles, and it made the days go better. It made it easier. So those were both things from there. Those were my two favorite things that I could think of.
Doesn't get much better than that. And third, because like I said, we already covered the first one earlier. Third of the rapid fire, best advice anyone ever gave you.
Best advice ever gave me. Don't take it personal. Don't take what's going on to you personal, unless somebody's actually trying to hurt you, like for no reason. But don't take it personal. It's just a job. I hate to say it. The bad guys are doing just a job. We're doing a job. If you take it personal, that's when you get in trouble, right? The other two, the one is don't be afraid to ask for help. You can't know everything, and don't be afraid to ask for advice. I came into HESI. I came into emergency service. I came into highway. What did I know from that? So I would turn around to the cops and say, "You're a senior guy. Tell me what I got to do. I'll put my name on it, but tell me what to do. Ask for help." And the other one is, and this is the same thing from back in housing, know what bosses and what answers you got to give them. Some bosses you can say, "Hey, boss, I don't know what the hell happened. This is what happened," and you can work it. And know the boss, you have to say, "Well, this is what the patrol guy said, so this is what happened." And if you're looking for that, those are the best advice. But the biggest one is don't take it personally.
I think it's good advice to have, especially today's day and age. It's very applicable. Fourth, and you could say multiple for this because you worked in so many different places, with the exception of the Bronx. You were never assigned to the Bronx. You worked in the Bronx, covering and flying.
Oh, yeah.
Never assigned there. So I'll ask you, favorite bar or restaurant in New York City? And again, say multiple because you were in a lot of different places.
You're one of the ones, and it's just, I guess it's an emotional thing. One if by land, two if by sea. It's in the Greenwich Village. It's an amazing restaurant. We did there when I first started dating my wife. We went there once or twice. If you go by Pizza Stars, if you ever look at the best ones, most of them are Staten Island. You got the Nino's, your Joe and Pat's. You have some of those. I love those. That's one of the biggest things I miss from New York is the food, because out here it's either Manhattan style, 5, 10 star, or it's nothing. Bars, I wasn't a big bar guy. It was never my big thing. Better at their house. But yeah, those are about it. I wasn't a big fan of anything else,
Simple, man. Keep it simple. I don't mind. Yeah, I'm not a big bar guy either. Especially now, I'm like, it's weird because people, they kid me. You're old enough to drink now. I'm like, that doesn't mean I have to. I'll have one or two, but I'm like, I don't understand the appeal of being so plastered you can't remember where you are, what you're doing, and the next morning you wake up and you don't remember what you did. It doesn't sound too appealing to me. I don't judge those who do, but for me, I'm like, I'd rather remember the good times.
My big thing
my
was
faculties.
My big thing was this. I said, it's funny. We just did that. My son just turned 21 in February. He flew back from college, and we took him out that night. Have his first drink when he's officially 21 with his dad and his mom. Mm-hmm. So we went to a local place here, and it reminded me why I didn't want to be in bars anymore. I said, because you have the stupid drunks, and you have the sloppy drunks, you have the happy drunks, but more importantly, I'm in a place that I can't hear. Even if I'm 2 inches from your ear screaming, I'm spending $20 on a drink with people I don't know and don't really care about. I can go back to my house or someplace more quiet. I can have a conversation, listen to music I like for a quarter of the price. And That was always my attitude. It doesn't mean that my wife's always a bar girl. She always liked going out and hanging out and having fun and seeing the nightlife and just people watching. That just wasn't me. I don't know if it was the job. I did enough people watching while I was working. But that was it. I was just never a bar guy.
Pete Grady says hi.
Hi, Pete.
Good to see you, Pete. Still trying to get Pete on the show one of these days. As the Eagles would sing, one of these nights.
Days. I was talking to another guy who has stories. Another great person I love working with.
Yeah, Segretti's the best. And the fifth and final one, I mean, you kind of talked about it with not taking anything personally, but expand on it. If you can grab anybody coming on the job now, especially somebody that's brand new in emergency service, what advice would you give them?
Okay. Well, yeah, I'd still give the same advice I gave guys when they came on when I was working. Okay, your job is to help them. Your job is not to get the glory. Your job is to help the cops because they're calling for your help. As is, even if they came and tell you, take the pen from this side of the table to that side of the table, do it. No matter what they ask you to do, that is your job, and that's your main job, is to help the cops, not to get glory, not to look for the big thing. We're there to help them and make their life easier. Because you know what? No matter what, how much danger we did and how much we did, the harder the job is patrol. And I hate to tell you, I knew what I walked in sometimes. Most of the time, I knew what I was walking into. Did it make it harder? But walking into something and having no idea what you're walking into is probably the most dangerous thing you could do, right? So support them. Mm-hmm. Don't take the job personally. Know when to ask for help. Know your what's the famous issue phrasing. Know your job, do your job. You know, and that's it. You know what I mean? And you know, when you say that, my niece just came on, not the NYPD. She came on. She's in the Jersey Shore in the police department. She just joined. And yeah, she gets the words of wisdom from me. You know what I mean? You know, do what you want with it and listen to it. But I would say those would be the same thing I give to them. You know, learn. You know, especially in the beginning, keep your mouth shut and listen. Absorb what you can. You know, absorb what you can, because some of the people above you, especially guys like Steve that have been there forever, that are still there, the wealth of knowledge that is there, listen and learn. You're going to make mistakes. We always said, new people when they came in, if you're not going to listen and you make mistakes, I'm going to hammer you. If you're listening and you make mistakes, that's what we're here for. But if you're a wise guy and you won't listen to what we say and you don't listen to the senior people and you're just a wise guy and you make that mistake, God help you around me.
That's a good, that's a fair perspective. And I'll give you an example before we say goodbye for the night. I got the chance to go down not too long ago to ESU Medal Day. In the car with me, and mind you, I'm not an E-man, but I was hanging on to everything, was Tommy Longa. He's driving. Tommy Longa's got almost 23 years in emergency. Passenger seat was Greg Welch. He's got 25 years, and it'll be 26 this year in emergency. The junior guy in that car next to me was Chris Williams, and he's got 20. And this year will be, I believe 20. Right. 20 years in ESU. Between those three guys is over 60 years worth of police experience and emergency service experience. And I have never been in the NYPD, nor have I been in the emergency service unit. I'm just a measly civilian. I was hanging on to every word. Chris was sleeping, well-deserved because he had just worked the brutal tour the night before. But Tommy and Greg held on to every word.
Oh, yeah. And you know what? I will to this day. You know, even when I do get to see the old timers, I'll sit there and listen, because you never know when you're getting that gem. You know, and just
hang on to it.
Yeah, I agree.
This has been a banner show. I like I said, can't thank you enough. This was very much enjoyable. Before I say goodbye to the audience for the evening, is there any shout outs to anyone or anything you would like to give, Scott?
Me, just I just shout out to the guys at Worth. You know, people ask, do I miss it? My expression is this: I don't miss the circus. I miss the clowns. Yeah. I miss working with the guys. I just miss everybody. I hope everybody is well. And, you know, I'm out here in Park City, ski area of the world. It's great that I can't ski anymore, which is very ironic. You want to reach out to me. You guys know how to get a hold of me. You want to come out and visit? Doors are always open. You know what I mean? Come visit. If you anything coming on, just wish everybody well and hope everybody enjoys their retirements.
Well said. Well said. I want to thank you. Stick around. We'll talk off here. I want to thank everybody that tuned in tonight. Rather you be retired ESU or not, it's always great to see you guys in the chat, whether you were tuning in via YouTube, LinkedIn, or Twitter. Coming up next on the Mike the New Haven podcast. So I just want to say we don't have a show this Friday. We're off this Friday. So if you don't see a show this Friday, guys, that's the reason why. But we're back next week with 2 shows. Next Wednesday, finished up as the acting chief of operations for the New York City Fire Department. Found him through LinkedIn, so I'm excited about that. And that's going to be Rich Bladis for volume 57 of The Best, the Bravest, interviews with the FDNY's elite. And then Friday, another ESU show. You worked with him as well. He was a transit rescue guy. Daryl Summers will make his debut on the New Haven podcast for volume 45.
He was Franco's partner.
Yes, he was. They went to the Trade Center bombing in '93 together. So he will be the guest for volume 45 of the E-Men Inside the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit. That's not this Friday. That's next Friday, 7 p.m. And like I said, next Wednesday is former Chief of Operations Bladis of the FDNY for another volume of the Best of the Bravest interviews with the FDNY's elite. In the meantime, on behalf of producer Victor and Sergeant Scott Zink, I am Mike Colón, and we will see you next time. And as the E-men like to say, anytime, baby. Take care and have a great night.